Chapter 7067 Near Full Body Augmentation. One of the assignments that VES accepted was to pick up St. Isabel Coton. The Larkinson ace pilot had lost her entire body during a misguided but ultimately successful attempt to break her limits. Her entire body got burned, but her upgraded willpower exerted just enough control over the flames to keep them relatively light around her head. Combined with the modest fortification provided by her willpower, her brain had received minimal damage. Human technology allowed for people to replace nearly their entire body with artificial substitutes. No matter whether they replaced their bodies with bioengineered or more mechanical components, so long as anyone could afford the expensive price tags, they could completely upgrade their bodies to superior variations. During the Age of Conquest, the concept of a human came under repeated attack. As greedy and ambitious people sought greater power and wealth for themselves, they tried to invest in their improvement in any way possible. They funded the development of new and more extreme augmentations. These ranged from splicing alien genes into the human genetic makeup to creating a supercomputer that was designed to accommodate a human consciousness. Few of these experiments succeeded. Most of them outright failed, while a minority only produced partial or conditional successes. Many clients did not care. They only paid attention to the results. They accepted the side effects without considering their full implications, as they were too busy with climbing up the ranks and outcompeting their rivals and enemies. Due to this insane demand, the augmentation sector continued to boom. Scientists and developers became flooded with cash and could procure all of the facilities and resources they wanted in order to invent even more extreme but high-performing products. Back then, their supervision had been grossly inadequate. Many star empires and star nations all maintained different policies. The mad scientists who developed the most extreme but promising augmentations could always leave the places where the rule of law was strong and move to a state where they could kidnap children and experiment on them with near impunity without getting into trouble with the authorities. Due to these fractured and inconsistent enforcement patterns, the liberated scientists freely indulged in their fantasies and created many products that produced far more problems than they solved. The Age of Conquest was a golden age for the augmentation sector. Many of the implants and genetic treatments used by humans to this day could trace their origins during this near-mythical time period. Unfortunately for many transhumanists and cybernetic enthusiasts, the Age of Mechs kicked off with a complete reversal on all of the rampant augmentation development. The MTA and the CFA had managed to rise up during an age that was previously dominated by monsters that wore human skins. No matter whether they were chi cultivators or excessively augmented superhumans, both of them had completely lost all of their empathy, their common sense, and their ability to identify with normal humans. The Big Two sought to eradicate this trend that caused far too many people to lose their humanity in exchange for more power than they deserved to wield in their lifetimes. Their efforts bore limited success. Their attempts to regulate the augmentation sector forced many scientists and developers to follow ethical rules that they previously treated as worthless. Their output became heavily restricted as they needed to be much more rigorous in their testing while making sure they stayed away from one of the many taboos imposed by the new regime. The Meshers and the Fleeters also initiated a profound cultural change in human society. Although they were unable to remove the urge to upgrade oneself in order to attain greater intelligence and abilities, they were at least able to reassert the value of being human and make a lot of extreme and inhuman augmentations undesirable. During the Age of Mechs, the combination of heavy-handed regulation and more subtle cultural influencing led to a sharp retreat of the augmentation sector. Third-raters rarely managed to get in touch with them. Cheaper augmentations simply did not exist as the risks became unacceptably high when trying to produce augmentations on the cheap. Second-raters were able to access them easier, but the selection of implants and gene mod templates were largely constrained by laws. Their capabilities were limited and did not generate too much concern. First-raters, and especially the wealthier ones, had not been able to get rid of their dependence on augmentations. While the Big Two had managed to get rid of the worst practices and abuses, they were not able to fully restrain the human need to become better. It was telling that even the Meshers and the Fleeters themselves relied heavily on augmentations in order to maintain their superiority over other humans. Since that was the case, the Big Two could never fully eliminate the gigantic augmentation sector. Even the chosen human, who exerted an enormous influence on humanity's relationship with augmentations, could not overcome the immense opposition against a near-total ban. Fortunately, most first-raters still valued their humanity to varying degrees. They were unwilling to become inhuman just so that they could raise their performance to the next level. Full body replacements and other extreme transformations rarely took place. They had become entirely phased out by designer babies. Parents hired biotech specialists who methodically planned out the augmentation journey of their next child. By planning ahead, these experts could not only optimize the selection of augmentations to produce the greatest possible synergies, but also avoid hasty and ill-thought additions that could completely disrupt the mental balance of the designer baby. The designer baby solution therefore presented the most ideal way for people to undergo augmentation. While this did not provide an adequate solution to people who were born as baseline humans or those who had experienced a rapid rise or drop in wealth and status, it satisfied most first-raters. Full-body replacements like the ones implemented on Isabel Coton were therefore the exception rather than the rule. As VS boarded an armored shuttle that took him to an exclusive military hospital and biomedical research institute, he received a brief tour from one of the directors of the large and luxurious facility. The hospital and related grounds hosted tens of thousands of patients, each of whom were locked in various stages of their recovery journey. The Red War is a conflict marked by high death rates. The director explained to VS as they toured the serene grounds. You should understand more than I once a mech or warship's defenses are shattered by the transphasic weapons wielded by the native aliens. Total annihilation is quick to follow. Those who manage to escape by ejecting the cockpits or escape pods are usually unharmed. Usually does not mean always. VS spoke. The native aliens have never abided by any formal or informal agreements that prohibit the deliberate targeting of escape vessels. They target our escape pods while we do the same to theirs. We rarely take prisoners because it is too much of a hassle to keep captives that we have no use of. Our hatred against each other is so great that we refuse to entertain any prisoner swaps. The director grimly nodded. That is true. This is why there are not many hospitals and recovery facilities that are dedicated to treating injured soldiers. There are many more hospitals that are dedicated to treating wounded but surviving civilians that received a first-hand taste of alien brutality. However, you shall not be seeing any of them here. Wounds suffered by civilians are different from those suffered by soldiers, and mech pilots present an especially difficult challenge to treatment centers. VS gazed around the grounds and noted dozens of patients that were healthy enough to spend their time outdoors. Many of them bore visible signs of wounds and marks of treatment that had yet to be cosmetically hidden. One soldier had lost a part of his skull and bore a refined but unambiguously artificial metal enclosure in its place. Another wounded trooper had lost both of his legs but was currently regrowing them, as could be seen from the transparent tanks wrapped around and below the knees. The devices stimulated the regrowth of leg tissue, enabling the soldier to regain legs that would perfectly align to his original physique. This was a benefit that alternative treatments such as grafting cloned legs or fully cybernetic limbs could not match. There was even a group of humans that had accepted full cybernetic body replacement treatment. These people clearly stood out among all of the patients. They all radiated a sense of undeniable strength due to the power of their cybernetic limbs and other parts. No human hearts beat inside their chests anymore. The only blood that still flowed through their brains was the small amount that was still needed to keep their original organic brains healthy and functional. For the rest of the body, small-scale power reactors supplied energy to all of the electronic components that ensured that their artificial bodies remained strong and in working condition. Does the current situation of Isabel Coton resemble these patients? VS asked. Every patient's circumstance and treatment is unique. We do not believe in standardized treatments. The director responded. Near full body replacements for mech pilots has always presented a serious challenge to our staff. The brains of the patients must be retained as much as possible, as there is no means of piloting a classical mech with cloned or electronic replacements. Is that still the case these days? VS asked. Carmine mechs are available nowadays. I see no reason why those who have undergone more extreme brain treatments cannot bond with a Carmine mech. As long as they still consider themselves human, they should be able to get back into action. Our researchers have not conducted the relevant experiments themselves, but we have access to the results of other institutions that have performed the relevant studies. We have found that it is theoretically possible for patients who have received these brain conversions to still be able to pilot Carmine mechs. In practice, many patients reject this option even if their original brains are in worse condition. Far too many of them value their ability to pilot mechs by relying on their genetic aptitudes. VS did not blame these skeptical pilots for clinging to such a notion. Everything was still new. Glitches and failures could happen at any time. It was not wise to gamble your entire career on experimental treatments. Saint Isabel Coton still retains her original brain, right? Oh yes. You do not need to feel concerned about her. As an ace pilot, she possesses several advantages and disadvantages that make it easier to complete certain steps but also hinders the completion of other steps of her treatment plan. Her original brain is strongly affected by her willpower to the point where it actively resists most artificial modifications and additions. It has been an uphill battle for our researchers to install a cranial implant piece by piece. By stretching out this installation process over several months, we are able to trick the patient's unconscious behavior into believing that little has changed. By taking the incremental approach, we have completed a vital process while giving her fragile brain plenty of time to heal and adapt to the trickle of upgrades. He liked the sound of that. While it was a time-consuming process to install the implant components piece by piece, the results should definitely be worth all of the effort. So does Isabel currently have a powerful cranial implant at her disposal? Yes. The director smiled with pride. We have partnered with one of our implant development companies to customize a cranial implant for an ace pilot. This is a formidable challenge, as the brain and physique of every ace pilot mutates in different directions due to the unique properties of their willpower and domain fields. So every ace pilot requires a custom job. Just so, Professor Larkinson. It has been extra challenging to devise a cranial implant for Saint Isabel Coton as her E-energy attribute alignment is strongly biased towards the fire element. The researchers and developers had to experiment with many samples of fire-attributed hypermaterials before they found the ones that worked well with the rest of the implant. The inclusion of these hypers also strengthened the patient's ability to sense and channel fire-attributed E-energy. Chapter 7068 Survival Build Fixed. Is all of this brain stuff safe? VS asked. I mean, I am already aware that implant developers have successfully incorporated hypermaterials in their latest generations of cranial implants, but the brains of mech pilots and especially high-ranking ones are different. How much has the tech used in St. Isabel's cranial implant been tested? This was a sensitive topic, especially during the Age of Dawn where many rules had changed. Not nearly as much as we would prefer. The hospital director frankly admitted. The pace of development in the augmentation sector has multiplied by at least an order of magnitude than before. Since the Great Severing, the evolution which has taken over the transhumanist faction from the chosen human. The new leader has a much more proactive vision of human augmentation. Many laws have been rescinded and almost all of the remaining regulations have been softened to promote faster and more powerful development. That ultimately comes with an enormous reduction in the amount of mandatory testing that is required before releasing any product or service. VS did not look good after hearing that. So there is a significant risk that any of the novel augmentations used to reconstruct St. Isabel's body can glitch out at any time? The probability is not high, Professor Larkinson. We have conducted extensive simulations as well as isolated live experiments, and we have worked out many potential flaws and vulnerabilities. What we have not been able to do is test the interactions between all of the different implants and cybernetic components working together while being actively under the influence of the patient's willpower. We have tried our best to account for these conditions and implement contingencies, but there is only so much tech we can fit in an artificial body of human proportions. I see. Does that mean we have to assign dedicated cybernetic experts to her team so that her condition can be monitored on a daily basis? Correct. It is best to see her new body as a highly engineered machine that is 90% mechanical with a limited number of organic tissue interspersed throughout her body for various reasons. Her new body shares more similarities with a high-end mech than a humanoid organism. Her cybernetic body not only demands regular maintenance but also updates and bug fixes over the course of its life cycle. The worst part is that it is already out of date. VS had an inkling of what the director was talking about. The cybernetic empire? The mention of the elephant in the room caused the director's mood to plunge. You guessed correctly. Before the return of Bridgehead 1, Yernstall was known as the center of human augmentation. Encouraged by the new policies implemented by the evolution which the transhumanist faction and other relevant groups concentrated many of our R&D institutions on Yernstall 4 and Yernstall V. Not only have they made many attainments, the cross-pollination that takes place between them has also led to many joint innovations and enhanced knowledge sharing. We have made more advancements in the last 2 years than in 3 whole mech generations. VS crossed his arms. And then the cybers arrived, each of whom spent 53 years on starting up new lives and conducting a huge amount of research inside their safe and comfy greater space-time bubble. That is equivalent to 2 whole mech generations worth technological innovation and refinement. The gap between us is too big. Even if Bridgehead 1 is only one star system, it is not a normal one. With the polymath herself leading a star system-wide adoption of cybernetics in lieu of systematic cultivation, she has successfully created a society and culture that has not only embraced augmentation through body replacement, but created an enormous sector that is filled with mature companies and institutions that are all several generations ahead of us. Since her empire bears the word cybernetic in its name, you can easily imagine how much the cybers take pride in their augmentations. We do not think it is possible for us to catch up to their progress. This was an enormous blow to the transhumanist faction as well as many other groups that possessed a strong interest in human augmentation. All of their research and development amounted to nothing more than inferior and outdated results when they compared their works to that of the cybers. The cybernetic empire also protected its advanced technologies tightly, making it so that only a fraction of cybernetic innovations would trickle down to the rest of human-occupied space. This ensured that the cybers always maintained an absolute leadership position in this market. VS actually felt regret that he had arranged for Isabel to be treated by the meshers based in Yernstall. If he kept Isabel as a brain in a jar at this time, then he would have the freedom to approach the cybernetic empire and arrange a new and hypermodern cybernetic body for Isabel. Alas, it was too late to change his mind now. The Red Association installed too much of its own exclusive tech inside Isabel's new artificial form. It would be difficult for other organizations to repair, tweak, modify, or upgrade its systems for this reason. VS did not think of turning to the cybernetic empire to overhaul Isabel's cybernetic body and upgrade it to their standards. The cybers would ask a high price for the service, and their augmentations are not without their flaws and shortcomings. One advantage the cybernetics of the Red Association possessed was a much more integral understanding and application of hypermaterials. That became clear when the director began to explain the configuration of Isabel's extensive cybernetic suite. How much have you guys been able to meet the requirements set by our clan? As per your specifications, we have tried our best to make her new cybernetic body capable of protecting her against heavy damage. Even if her cockpit is breached by a powerful enemy attack, her body may not necessarily break due to how well it is protected. We have made a special effort to make her artificial physique as fireproof as possible. The director projected a humanoid figure and highlighted the exterior as well as a few internal components. The patient carries a compact shield generator in her abdomen that can generate a strong transphasic fire hyper-energy shield. Since it is not an Azure energy shield that is based on the water element, its ability to resist most damage types has decreased, but it has proven to be more effective at withstanding energy and heat damage. That was understandable. What else? Most of the metals used in the structure and exterior plating are made up of transphasic fire hyper-alloys. They provide excellent protection against most forms of flames and heat. Their physical damage resistance is also decent, but do not expect miracles on this front. I noticed that no superdimensional matter is involved. The director stared directly at VS in the eyes. That is true. We know too little about whether human beings can safely remain in very close proximity to different quantities of superdimensional matter, whether raw or processed into stabler alloys. We have barely completed such studies related to transphasic materials, and we have identified numerous instances where the health of carriers of transphasic implants are at risk. We prefer to conduct several years of intensive studies to figure out once and for all whether a new and volatile material is safe enough to be used in augmentations. From what I have heard from the relevant research institutions, their scientists have only just begun these studies. That meant that until these biotech experts had completed their studies, there was no immediate option to upgrade this toy machine. However, so long as they completed their research, Isabel and many other people gained the option to replace their existing transphasic cybernetics with superdimensional equivalents. They would probably have to supply their own superdimensional matter in order to complete this upgrade, but that was not a particularly big problem for the Larkinson clan. Compared to a future superdimensional upgrade, VS cared much more about another important factor. Have you been able to build an imitation of human blood vessels that penetrates every part of her new body? He asked. The director responded with a wry smile. This unusual request of yours has generated considerable consternation and frustration among the cybernetic experts assigned to this project. They had to make many uncomfortable compromises to the design in order to include false blood vessels that are primarily made out of alloys that include heat-resistant materials as well as fire hypermaterials. While they do not reach into every individual component, they still have a strong presence in the entire torso, all four limbs, and the neck as well as the lower head. You can channel pure flames through these channels and not inflict any damage to the false veins and the rest of the heat-resistant body. VS grinned when he heard this. He already had a vague intention of turning the Promethea Mark II into the first proper Bloodfire mech. He could think of no better candidate to choose from than this unique instance. Although the existence of the Dominion of Man already proved the viability of the Bloodfire Pact, the fact that it depended on the circulation of hot and dangerous fire-attributed E-energy made it very dangerous for ordinary people to pilot and fire Carmine mech of the specification. Just as the Terrans assigned to pilot the Witsap mech needed to undergo body modifications in order to be able to cycle the sap of the Emperor Tree through his veins, the pilots of future Bloodfire mechs needed to withstand the heat brought by fire energy on a repeated basis. As far as test pilots were concerned, Isabel Coton was not representative of the general population because of her extensive high-quality cybernetics and her unnaturally strong willpower. However, if VS just wanted to produce a success case with the least amount of risk, Isabel was by far the best candidate due to her insane resistance against flames and heat. He did not have to worry about accidentally cooking Saint Isabel Coton to death. Once he completed the Promethea Mark II and observed the performance of the Bloodfire system in action, he could easily design a downgraded version that was suitable to be piloted by any individual who was willing to install the augmentations required to safely circulate fire energy through their veins. This was certainly a heavy demand. VS did not expect massive numbers of people to agree to such an inhumane demand. Yet VS also expected much from those that did. Fire energy was powerful and potent, and Bloodfire mech could easily unleash enormous amounts of firepower. All of this would have to wait for the future, though. The first step was to make sure that Saint Isabel Coton recovered from her heavy injuries and regained her will to step back into the cockpit and fight to become stronger. What about the remaining features of her artificial body? We have incorporated an extensive range of weapons, defensive options as well as mobility enhancements. The director said. At the request of the recovering pilot herself, we have upgraded her arsenal at the cost of other reductions in performance. She currently possesses integrated laser weapons, integrated plasma weapons, a pair of compact flamethrowers, a plasma blade as well as a solid alloy blade. VS frowned. That sounds like a bit much. I know those weapon systems take up a lot of capacity in a cybernetic human body. We know, but this is a personal request from our client. I have already addressed her defensive options, so I will not repeat them. Her mobility options are relatively weak. Aside from an integrated single-use teleporter, she possesses strengthened legs, limited reactionless flight capability, and she can anchor her feet onto solid metal surfaces. Those options indeed sounded weak, but it was already the best that Isabel could hope for without sacrificing any of the other features of her artificial form. What about utility? We have upgraded all of her senses to the point where they can serve as substitutes of actual sensors. Aside from that, we have added powerful but compact processors to the lower head and spine that can enable her to perform calculations by herself or coordinate her computing with that of her ace pilot. We have also installed a robust communication system that enables her to overcome lighter forms of jamming and interference in order to transmit encrypted signals. She can even extend an antenna from her upper back that can boost her signal transmission and reception. That would look rather odd, but there were worse cybernetics on the market. Having an antenna stick out from your body was only a minor inconvenience in comparison. Chapter 7069 Burning with Spirit. After the hospital director gave VES an extensive overview of Isabel's new cybernetic body, he finally led him to a more private and better protected compound. This was the VIP recovery area where the people who were actually important received from their battlefield injuries. Many of them actually consisted of expert candidates and expert pilots. Each of them possessed the potential to ascend to a god pilot one day. Even if their chances of overcoming all of the trials in a long and difficult journey were slim, who knew whether they might succeed one day? The remaining patients consisted of mech pilots and norms who were heirs of powerful families or belonged to powerful organizations that paid a good price to deliver the best possible care. It was for that reason why the RA spared few expenses when setting up this section of the medical recovery complex. Doctors and other biotech professionals constantly remained on duty in order to monitor the conditions of the patients and respond to any emergencies that might arise. Small-scale Titan shields defended every section and wing of the luxurious compound, and mechs and infantry soldiers were constantly close at hand, though never too close in order to avoid putting the recovering patients on edge. VES was pleased with the amount of funding and effort the meshers had put into this facility. It reflected their belief in the primacy of humans over technology and showed how much they cared about helping people pick themselves up after they suffered a setback and gain an opportunity to grow from their learning experience. To that end, the hospital and its partner institutions had gone above and beyond to recover the most seriously injured soldiers who still possessed value. The doctors and other professionals provided meticulous care to remake, rebuild, and in a few cases reinvent the broken warriors that passed through their halls. Aside from the cybernetic empire, the Larkinsons couldn't have picked a better place to hand over responsibility of restoring St. Isabel Coton. While the Larkinson clan was able to heal broken soldiers as well, its capabilities were only sufficient for relatively mundane injuries. A case as extreme as that of Isabel required specialist care that only a few powers had available in the new frontier. This gap in capabilities was yet another reminder to VES that the Larkinson clan still had a long way to go before it became a true great power. In here, the director spoke as he led VES into a well-furnished gym hall. Ever since St. Isabel relearned how to move her old body, she has developed an obsession of turning her cybernetic body into a weapon. Without a mech for her to pilot, she has tried to use her artificial form as a substitute. While her training is excessive, her body is designed to cope with physical extremes. Her strong will allows her to train continuously for 12 straight hours or more, with only a few hours of rest and meditation in between. That sounded rather excessive to VES. Isn't she supposed to spend more time on rest? That would be the case for normal patients, professor, but expert pilots and ace pilots are different. St. Isabel has deep feelings of inadequacy. She equates peace to impotency. She has a strong desire to become strong, and that means she must keep herself active somehow. She has taken to training her weapon handling skills and her mastery over her cybernetic body as her preferred means to prepare for combat in the future. VES soon understood how much Isabel threw herself into training when he came across an obstacle course. Isabel used the formidable power of her legs to sprint across the distance at a pace that was several times greater than a professional athlete. She then came across a straight wall but managed to translate her forward momentum as well as her new reactionless flight capability to run and vault over it in one straight move. At the other side, she came face to face with a trio of practice bots. Each of them shot out harmless training laser beams, but none managed to strike their target because Isabel had already kicked herself off the ground with the help of her blisteringly fast reaction speed. Even as she evaded the laser beams, a pair of small laser guns unfolded from her shoulders and struck two of the bots in an instant, marking them as disabled. As for the remaining bot, Isabel raised one of her arms and sprayed a blast of orange flames that knocked out the remaining bot. After getting rid of her opposition, Isabel continued to traverse the obstacle course, demonstrating many different capabilities. Her torso-mounted plasma guns practically obliterated the solid wall that barred her way. Her alloy blade cut through a transphasic energy shield. She was able to navigate a lightless and soundless room with relative ease. Her transphasic fire energy shield was able to block a respectable amount of incoming laser beams and positron beams. For all intents and purposes, St. Isabel performed better than a first-class infantry commando. Although her weapons and armor were restricted by the size of her body, her excellent combat acumen along with the instincts of a saint enabled her to complete an obstacle course that would have tripped most highly trained infantry soldiers. There was no way VES or the Larkinson clan would ever think of commanding Saint Isabel to exit the cockpit and board an enemy starship or whatever. However, if Isabel ever came under attack when she was far away from her ace mech, then she would always be ready to defend herself. Once she ended her latest run, the obstacle course began to scramble and reform into a completely new and randomized circuit. It turned out that everything consisted of smart metal. That made it easy to specify every parameter and customize every part of the course. As VES and the hospital director approached the ace pilot, Isabel stared back at them with intense artificial eyes. Those orbs were able to perceive far more than just the visible spectrum. Once VES came close enough, the two stared at each other. Saint Isabel Coton had returned from the brink of death with a fundamentally different body. Though the Meshers had done their best to restore the facade of her former human body, they were not able to get rid of the uncanny sensation that clearly marked her form as anything but organic. Beneath the fake human skin rested transphasic fire hyper-alloy components. Together with her willpower, Isabel attracted a constant influx of fire energy, causing her body and the air around her to feel hotter than usual. Her body contained a formidable amount of heat and energy. What also impressed VES about Isabel was the strength that exuded from her physical body. She had never possessed a particularly strong body. She was not trained as an infantry soldier, so had no need to build up or augment her body for this purpose. Yet her total body reconstruction gave her a pair of arms and legs that far exceeded the strength of her former human limbs. Isabel actually had to relearn how to interact with the environment around her due to this explosive strength increase. She might vault herself to the ceiling or crush anything in her hands if she did not regulate her newfound physical strength properly. She received so many new features and upgrades that it should have taken 4 to 7 years for her to fully acclimate with all of her gifts. Yet an ace pilot was far from a normal human. She had climbed her way up the ranks and proved beyond anyone's doubts that she was one of the best mech pilots of the Larkinson clan. No matter the means she used to force her latest breakthrough, the fact that she succeeded and managed to muster up the motivation to recover to this point spoke of great inner strength. VS dropped most of his concerns about Isabel's condition. "Hello, Isabel." "Hello." "VS." The ace pilot spoke in a voice that closely mimicked her old one, though it was not quite the same. "Have you come here to take me away? You look a lot better than I expected. I see the Meshers have indeed taken good care of you. To be able to move like this so quickly after starting your treatment shows that they have made an excellent effort. Is your treatment complete, or do you need to extend your stay?" Isabel's artificial expression started to frown. Her expressiveness had improved compared to before. Her new face may be compensating a bit too much. "To be honest, I am thinking about staying here longer," she eventually responded. "The soldiers here have good stories and taught me a lot about the reality of piloting mechs outside of the Larkinson clan. The training facilities here are all top-notch, and I can request access to any combat instructor or training manual that is available in the RA. Besides, my mech is still many months away from restoration, right? Right?" VS looked pensive. The Meshers couldn't resist. They subtly attempted to win her over by providing her VIP treatment. If Isabel was not so committed to the Larkinson clan and the Promethea, then she may have been thinking about defecting to the Red Association. Fortunately, it was not too late. "We can't provide you with the same level of training facilities and other amenities aboard the Tarask," he honestly said. "If you think you need to master your control over your new body further, then it is best if you stay here for a few more months. We don't have an ace mech for you yet. Just like Venerable Rosa Orphan, you'll have to wait patiently for us to complete your new machine." "Then why should I leave and accompany you, sir?" "Because I need your cooperation to upgrade the Promethea Mark II into a very new and powerful elemental Carmine mech," VS said with a smile. "The Bloodfire mech that I have envisioned is a perfect match for the Promethea Mark II project. As long as you are willing to form an upgraded version of a blood pact with your upcoming ace mech, we can turn it into a truly special machine. Your control over it will be unparalleled, and the synergies you can achieve with it will reach a whole new level. Are you willing to commit your life to the Promethea Mark II, or would you rather stick to being a regular ace pilot?" VS was not quite sure of her intentions at this moment. Isabel went through a traumatic life-changing event and only recently regained her body and ability to communicate. Whatever her intentions may be a few months ago, she was a completely different person today, so her opinions may have swung in a completely different direction. Fortunately, Isabel still held a lot of trust towards VS. "The Promethea saved me during that time," she said in a softer tone that her artificial body conveyed pretty well. "I owe my life to her. It is only right that I pledge to dedicate myself to mastering her for the rest of my career. I am not blind to the risks, but I will become stronger than ever with the help of the new blood pact that you have in mind. I cannot afford to be weak anymore. If I do not become strong enough to resist the flames, then I deserve to get burned." VS could clearly feel the conviction from her willpower. She truly wanted to wash away the shame and ignominy of her near-death and redeem herself on the battlefield. She also understood the value of a good mech and wanted to do whatever she could to make it better. VS smiled. "That is good to hear, Isabel. With your active cooperation, I can conduct experiments on the Bloodfire system and make sure it works properly with your new physique." Chapter 7070, Cybernetics and Mechs. Chapter 7070, Cybernetics and Mech VES brought Isabel back to the same compound where he and his family resided on Yernstall 4. There was no need to bring her to the Tarask right away. In principle, VES could even let her remain at the recovery facility for a few more weeks until the Blue Jay fleet was ready to depart to the Rebarthan Pact. However, VES grew concerned about the RA's attempt to win her over. The more Isabel remained in the custody of the Meshers, the greater the possibility that she might actually choose to defect to their side. VES liked to think that Saint Isabel possessed too much loyalty to the Larkinson clan to ever contemplate such a choice, but nothing was impossible. It was best to remove the possibility entirely by keeping Isabel closer to him than the Meshers. This decision burdened him with keeping Saint Isabel occupied. She needed to spend her time wisely in order to start off with the best possible footing once she was finally able to get back into action. VES thought for a moment before deciding to dredge a hefty amount of knowledge before transmitting it to Saint Isabel over a secure channel. Her new cybernetic form also caused her mind to become partially digitized, so she was able to receive, decrypt, and skim over the documents at a rapid pace. This is the... Do you remember the set of fire element spells that I have given you in the past? I do. Kuroshi and I have learned most of them already. They get easier to learn the more spells you have already mastered. I stopped studying more because they do similar things to the previous ones. As useful as it is to know how to cast a fireball and so on, they are too weak for me to bother with using in person or while piloting a mech. I can get better results with a firearm. They are beginner spells. They are not meant to be too powerful. They are meant to be easy to learn and digest. You may have outgrown those beginner spells already, but the principles and concepts that you have comprehended while mastering them serve as the foundation for more advanced applications of fire energy manipulation. You want me to continue with learning more spells? Not the spells, but the working principles that make them work. VES corrected the ace pilot. Learning the spells is a means to an end, though they are quite useful by themselves. Have you taken a look at the documents I have sent? Yes. From what I can understand while skimming over them, they all have to do with teaching me how to defend myself against flames and make myself more fireproof. You will need this knowledge for what is to come, he told her. Since you have agreed to upgrade the Promethea Mark II into the very first Bloodfire mech, I want to aim high rather than low. What do you mean by that, sir? Unlike the Yellow Jackets, which have one of the lowest possible floors of my works, the Promethea Mark II shall leverage her experimental Bloodfire system to the highest theoretical configuration that I can get away with. I should normally be cautious and err on the side of caution when implementing a brand new experimental system like this. Trying to form a blood pact by using raw and hot fire energy as a substitute for regular human blood is already a risky choice, but I am not satisfied with settling for lower concentrations. I have a theory that the greater the quantities and concentration of fire energy circulating through your body and the mech frame of the Promethea Mark II, the stronger the positive and negative effects of the Bloodfire system. As a woman who specialized in playing with fire, she was not unaccustomed to this setup. So in other words, you want to push the limits of your new tech as far as you think you can go. You want to trade stability for power. I can definitely see why that is risky, but since we are both so new at this, we don't entirely know where we should set the limit. VS nodded. That is true, but I will attempt to determine the safety threshold through numerous experiments that I will conduct on you in the following weeks. At the same time, I want you to learn the theories and practice the techniques described in the documents that I have sent you. I have acquired them by exchanging resources with the Red Collective, so I do not want you to waste this investment. It is vital for you to learn how to make yourself more resistant against fire energy and excessive heat exposure. Is this truly necessary? She wondered. I do not mind learning this theory, but I am anything but a normal person now. I hardly have any flesh left. Most of my body is now made up of heat-resistant alloys. I know, but more is always better. I am especially concerned about your ability to tolerate spiritual flames and heat. The fire element is one of the more dangerous energy attributes that you can encounter. Your advanced tech won't be able to help you there. When you interface with your ace mech, you will be able to rely on your true resonance and Saint Kingdom to strengthen your artificial body and veins, but I do not think the effect will be too strong. It is a body, not a mech. Normal ace pilots are unable to reinforce their own fleshy bodies with their true resonance, and I expect your case to be the same. I was meaning to talk to you about that, VS. Isabel said with a frown. Ever since I gained this powerful new body of mine, I repeatedly tried to resonate with it with and without the help of my companion spirit. However, aside from making my body parts slightly stronger and hotter, I fail to produce the same results as I can with a mech. He did not look surprised. It won't work. Your cybernetic body may remind you of a mech, and it does share a number of similarities, but they are not the same. The reason why it isn't working is because your body is fundamentally not a mech by definition. It may be a machine, but it is not significantly larger than a human body, and it does not contain any resonating materials. More importantly, it is not developed by a proper mech designer. Instead, your cybernetic body is a custom job involving hundreds of biotech experts, cybernetics specialists, and other engineers. All of this means that your body lacks the essential connection that all mechs share. VS was not able to perceive the Red Kingdom and its many connections, but he did not need to guess that it had absolutely nothing to do with Isabel's cybernetic form. Whether this was the source or a symptom behind Isabel's inability to resonate with her body was not quite clear. This was a chicken and egg problem where everyone probably came up with their own opinions. Regardless, VES was clear that Isabel's attempts would never succeed even if she possessed the willpower of a god pilot. Just as a sword practitioner could only resonate with swords, a mech pilot was only meant to resonate with mechs. Perhaps you could get away with stretching the definition of the latter by employing machines as small as demi-mechs or as large as juggernauts, but there were limits to how far you could test the definition of a mech. Saint Isabel looked disappointed. Oh, I see. Is it possible for you to design a new cybernetic body that contains resonating materials? Will that work, you think? VS had to seriously think about the answer. He could see how it could theoretically work, but he still did not believe his work would connect to the Red Kingdom. The short answer is that it is unlikely to work, he told her. However, there may be a chance to make it work if I attempt to create a demi-mech instead. It will be considerably larger than a suit of heavy combat armor, but it will be far smaller than a light mech. You won't be able to fit through tight indoor corridors, but you will still be able to squeeze through larger ones, though stuff like this depends on the design more often than not. If indoor operation is truly necessary, then I could design a very compact tiger or dwarf-style demi-mech. And I would be able to interface it with my cybernetic body connections rather than a neural interface? She asked. Yes, but have you just forgotten about your decision to turn the Promethea Mark II into a Bloodfire mech? Bloodfire is just a label. The proper designation for this kind of mech is an advanced fire-attributed Carmine mech. The point is that as soon as you form a Bloodfire pact with your Promethea Mark II, you must abide by your promise. You are not allowed to pilot any other mech. You will not be able to control this theoretical cybernetic demi-mech that I can design for you. The fact that your current cybernetic form is not defined as a mech is therefore a boon rather than a curse. If the opposite was the case, you would no longer have a body to control once you exit the cockpit of your ace mech. Isabel clearly did not think about these consequences. She frowned and looked down at her artificial arms and body. She started to understand the greater limitations imposed by her new corporeal form. I see. We should forget about it then. We might be able to take advantage of your cybernetic form to do other cool stuff in the future. VS proposed. For example, we can technically detach your head from the rest of the body and place it into a smaller and much more compact cockpit, though that may be a bit too much considering that your torso is essential to the functioning of the Bloodfire system. How about detaching your arms and legs instead? If you are willing to pilot your mech while removing the limbs and stashing them somewhere safe, then Romanda DeVos, Gloriana and I can completely redesign the cockpit of the Promethea. Instead of making a traditional cockpit that has enough open space to fit 2 or 3 individuals if they squeeze in tight, we can reduce this free space to fit just your head and torso but nothing else. Isabel had never thought about this. She looked perplexed as she tried to imagine what it would be like to pilot a mech while residing in such a cramped cockpit. Are you treating my body as if it is a plug that needs to be inserted into a socket? That is a pretty good analogy. You can think of it that way. Do not underestimate the benefits of shrinking your free space. The additional capacity can be used to increase the energy reserves of the Promethea Mark II or add enhanced protection to your cockpit. There are many reasons to favor this design choice and not many reasons that argue against it. I highly recommend you think about accepting this new layout. It won't work for most mech pilots as they do not like to chop off their arms and legs, but that is not a problem for you. From what I have learned about your cybernetic body, your configuration is semi-modular, meaning that trained personnel can detach your arms and legs without compromising the functionality of the rest of your artificial body. This is ideal for the new cockpit that I have in mind. VS already had plenty of ideas on how he could take advantage of these new conditions. With a mech as compact as the upcoming Promethea Mark II, it was best to reduce the size of the cockpit and make it a lot more compact without making too many sacrifices in terms of defense, mobility, and other essential features. If the cockpit could be shrunk by a factor of 3 or 4, then that would free up enough capacity to integrate another module or significantly improve the performance of one core system. Chapter 7071, Ottaviani and Partners. Chapter 7071, Ottaviani and Partners. Isabel could not make up her mind whether she wanted to embrace the compact cockpit concept proposed by VES. She could rationally understand the benefits of piloting her machine with a much smaller cockpit than normal, but the thought of getting rid of the limbs that made her more human-like sounded terrifying to her. She would be rendered helpless without any means of moving aside from relying on a relatively weak reactionless drive. That said, she did not dismiss this option outright. She recognized the potential gains of piloting a mech with a reduced cockpit. Its diminished size would free up room for additional energy cells or other benefits. Give me time to think about it, she ultimately told him. It would be nice if you can send me a draft image or blueprint so that I can visualize the experience of piloting my mech inside a shrunken cockpit. VS nodded. Got it. I will contact Lady Romanda DeVos of the DeVos Ancient Clan and request her cooperation for this task. She normally specializes in designing mechs with ultra-large cockpits, but her expertise should still be relevant when designing cockpits that follow the opposite direction of her design philosophy. I will cooperate as best as possible. It was a bit weird for a mech designer to develop such a weird design philosophy, but VES was grateful that Lady Romanda existed. It was much better to leave cockpit design and modification to a mech designer who specialized in the subject. Don't forget about the theory and techniques that I have passed on to you. He reminded the mostly recovered ace pilot. The higher you can raise your tolerance of fire energy, the more powerful your bloodfire mech will become. This is brand new technology that has very high potential. It is one of the key systems that has transformed the dominion of man from a regular dreadnought into a godship. Saint Isabel looked hopeful. How powerful can it make my Promethea Mark II? That depends on many factors. VS responded. The biggest variable that will determine how powerful your ace mech can become is the source of fire-attributed E-energy. I suppose you can rely on absorbing large amounts of E-energy radiation to meet your consumption, but there is only so much you can take from a medium-energy environment. It will also leave your ace mech vulnerable to regions of anomalous space where the flow of fire energy is diminished or extinguished entirely. It is best to integrate a self-contained source of fire energy into your machine. Does something like that even exist? Isabel skeptically asked. VS confidently smiled. Yes. I can think of at least two ways to solve this problem. The first is to secure the cooperation of Master Benedict Cortez of the Cross Clan. His Index System version 3.0 is not able to output enough E-energy to make a difference, but his remarkable alien variant Original Energy Bridge system is capable of outputting formidable amounts of electrical energy as well E-energy of the attributes derived from the source, which mostly comes in the form of heads or skulls taken from powerful mutated beasts or alien beings. In fact, the non-alien variant of this tech was based on taking advantage of the heads of high-ranking mech pilots, but that was so outrageous that VS did not dare to mention any word about it. Especially here on Yernstall 4, which was known as a stronghold of the Red Association. I heard that our relations with the Cross Clan has become more tense than before. That is somewhat true. We are still allies, but Master Benedict Cortez is not in a mood to collaborate with us at the moment. He may mellow out in a few years and we can always bribe him with enough superdimensional matter, but I would rather look for alternatives. What else do you have in mind? Nothing for now, VS honestly admitted. I am looking to acquire a relic or a powerful fire aspect reagent harvested from a calamity beast or other wonder of the universe. I am not too picky. So long as it generates a large amount of fire energy, I am confident that I can tame it and reshape it into a stable source of fire energy. I don't need to seek the cooperation of Master Benedict if the item already pumps out plenty of fire energy by itself. Well, it doesn't have to be a dead object. It can also be a living being as long as it is small enough to put inside a mech. Saint Isabel grew horrified at the thought of stuffing a living fire entity into the heart of her mech. Would its hostile energies course through her artificial veins? The pressure would definitely be great. It was no wonder that VS ordered her to practice techniques aimed at raising her fire energy resistance. It became much more vital for her to make sure that she would not get burned by the fire she hoped to wield as her weapon. Will you be able to find the source of fire energy here in Yernstall? That is the plan, Isabel. I will be meeting with a handful of trade brokers later today. We have assigned them to search for rare and high-end goods that match the descriptions on my wish list. I have made sure to add a source of fire energy to that. Yernstall's trade brokerage firms are well-connected and can find sellers that are well outside of the public eye. I am mildly optimistic that they can deliver what I have asked for. The only uncertainty is how much we need to pay to secure our prize. People all knew that the Larkinson clan had grown wealthy through a combination of mech sales, various business deals, battlefield plunder, and most crucially controlling the only known means of entering the blue dimension. That meant that there were a lot of shrewd businessmen out there that viewed the Larkinson clan as a fattened pig that was ripe for slaughter. The companies and traders found by the brokers would definitely ask high prices for their goods. The rarer and more difficult it was to acquire a specific item, the more outrageous the asking price would become. That would leave VS and the Larkinson clan in an uncomfortable position. They could still say no, but that may result in losing the only opportunity to obtain highly desirable goods. The only other way VS could obtain the rare goods he desired was to enter the system space and check the randomized selection of goods for sale in the Divine Bazaar. He saw a number of potentially useful items. There were always goods for sale that had a strong connection to the 5 classical elements. However, their potency was doubtful and the price in precious ascension points was great. VS would rather try and seek his luck in Yernstall where he could acquire a source of fire energy by trading more expendable resources. A day passed by as VS and his wife settled down and took care of a few matters. Neither of them had time to accompany their children all of the time, but that was what nannies were for. Shannon Maris and her colleagues took the children out to play. There were plenty of fun and interesting places to visit on a planet as well developed as Yernstall 4. From historical museums to water parks, the kids would never run out of venues to visit. Gloriana sunk her teeth into completing the Riot Mark III project with the help of the initial solutions provided by the Resonance Smith. While the superdimensional alloy formulas were relatively basic, they did the job and allowed for the creation of Archimechs that remained dimensionally stable. There was no risk of a superdimensional Archimech tearing itself apart one day. Despite the simplicity of the initial solution, Gloriana still had to commit a lot of time to her design work because she essentially had to apply the new alloys on every section and make individual adjustments due to changes in mass, density, heat capacity, and many other variables. The overall mech design remained the same, but the underlying details changed. In order to speed up her design work, she even applied to the mech supremacist faction to borrow a portion of the vast amount of processing power in the Jernstall system. Being able to perform a large amount of brute force calculations helped to speed up all of the simulation work, enabling Gloriana to gain greater confidence in the soundness of her altered design. While Gloriana did her best to finish the Riot Mark III project as soon as possible, VS busied himself with various different design projects. He coordinated with the Terrans to advance the Arboreal project. He helped out his wife by completing the easier but still time-consuming design work related to the Riot Mark III project. He also began to conduct a number of small experiments in order to develop a high-end bloodfire system for the Promethea Mark II project. VS would have preferred to move around the Jernstall Central Star node and take advantage of different opportunities, but moving in the open risked his safety. To that end, he tried to meet people at his temporary accommodations as best as possible while keeping his journeys to other destinations at a minimum. VS met his first trade broker inside the large and white-marbled office space located at the top of an estate. Gavin guided a distinguished middle-aged-looking gentleman into the office. The trade broker certainly carried himself as if he possessed a lot of connections. His tasteful green suit with a checkered gray tie stood out just enough to stand out from other businessmen but looked just classic enough to convey professionalism. "Sir, this is Raul Ottaviani, the founder and head of Ottaviani & Partners." The trade broker made a shallow but respectful bow. "It is an honor to meet you and be of service to you, Professor Larkinson. We may not be able to offer everything that you have wished for, but we have moved with great haste to identify promising opportunities that are available at this time." VS appreciated that. From what he heard, the other trade brokerage firms needed a week or so to gather enough comprehensive offers. Ottaviani & Partners evidently worked on a completely different timetable compared to its peers. "I should be thanking you for conducting a thorough search and tapping your contacts for the goods I need. Tell me more about the trading partners that you have managed to tap." "I am a citizen of a first-rate state from the old galaxy that you probably do not recognize," Raul Ottaviani began to explain. "It is to my regret that the pioneers of my old state has been too late in founding colonies in the new frontier. The great severing took place before more of my compatriots entered the Red Ocean, and that has caused us to suffer. None of our colonies managed to take off as they are located inside the border regions that have since been overrun by the native aliens. My condolences." The other man grimly smiled. "You do not need to do that, Professor. It is because of our weak foundation in this dwarf galaxy that I have spent much of my energies into building up Ottaviani & Partners. Without a state or colonial state of our own to support us, my firm invested a great deal of time into forging friendships with many smaller trading partners from many different first-rate states of the Red Ocean Union. Since they lack the prestige and connections of the Terrans and the Rebarthans, these trading partners have a greater demand on our services. Over time, our business transactions have increased and our friendships have grown stronger." He made it sound so simple, but VS knew it was anything but easy for him to successfully establish a brokerage firm in one of the most expensive star systems in human space. The fact that he succeeded as a self-made man meant that he truly possessed the business acumen to thrive in the sapphire of the Red Ocean. Such a man should be able to deliver much of what VS needed for a price that would definitely strain his tolerance. "Thank you for reading my work. If you wish to support the Mech Touch, please vote with your golden tickets. Purchase privilege for the Mech Touch. Read a varying amount of chapters ahead of regular readers while enjoying a 99% discount on unlocking new chapters. Join the Mech Touch's unofficial Discord server, https://discord.gg/apb5kcu. Chapter 7072, Booming Jernstall. Chapter 7072, Booming Jernstall. VS chatted with Raul Ottaviani for a few more minutes. Just as he expected from a successful broker, the head of Ottaviani & Partners had plenty of stories to share. He also had a good sense of what sort of information VS was interested in the most. The man knew more about the economy and business opportunities of Jernstall than anyone else. Without the backing of his old state back in the old galaxy, Raul had adopted the sapphire of the Red Ocean as his new homeland. The reappearance of Bridgehead 1 may be a disaster for the Red 2's control over Red humanity, but it has led to a resurgence of our economy, the trade broker said. The Terrans and the Rebarthans have declared their independence, but that has not only decreased their trade needs but increased them instead. They are flocking to central star nodes such as Jernstall in greater numbers in order to acquire the goods and services they need to make up for the gap the Meshers and the Fleeters have left behind. They have even gone as far as to skip intermediaries and transact with each other directly, considering they are peas in a pod. That surprised VS. "And the Red 2 allows them to enter their unofficial capital and conduct their trade?" VS inquired. "It is better that they do so in a territory they control than elsewhere. The Meshers and the Fleeters still earn a large amount of fees and taxes from their stay, their spending, and most of their transactions. Do not underestimate the magnitude of this revenue flow. There are strong interest groups among the local Meshers and Fleeters that have gone out of their way to reassure the Terrans and Rebarthans that it is still safe and convenient for them to trade in the central star node. It is rather problematic for them to possess such a strong pro-trade stance. They are being opposed by their more hostile peers who believe in choking out trade between the dissolute states. VS grimaced. I hope that does not happen. How much power do they have? You need not be concerned, Professor. Raoul responded with a reassuring smile. The pro-trade factions maintain a persistent advantage. They are not warmongers who advocate hostile actions against the seceded superstates. Their income also dwarfs that of the pro-war factions. The Red Association and the Red Fleet no longer receive tribute from the Terran Alliance and the Rebarthan Pact, which means that both of them are operating with severe deficits in income and material imports. The pro-trade factions are doing their best to fill these gaps. I see. The Meshers and the Fleeters were too accustomed to their wealth and luxuries. While most of their members were not decadent or anything, their research and their other activities demanded a huge amount of funding. They had long relied on their ability to suck blood from the states under their control to maintain their military supremacy and their technological lead. Now, the RA and the RF were both at risk of losing their absolute advantages in these areas. There are those among us who argue that the Red too have already lost their lead. Raoul said in a more subdued tone. Participating in the Red War has savaged their mechs and warships. They cannot replenish them as fast as they are being lost. This is particularly the case for warships, which are much larger and more expensive to build. If you have access to the right statistics, you will note that the Red Fleet has been trending away from constructing large and unwieldy battleships and allocated more shipyard capacity to constructing small to mid-sized warships instead. VS nodded in approval. His clan already owned a lot of sub-capital ships and capital ships, so he knew a thing or two about the differences between the two. This was especially the case after the tortuous Scream had entered into service. That is understandable. There is stuff that capital warships can do that smaller vessels simply cannot match up with, but it is much more important for the fleeters to maintain a presence in as many star systems along the border as possible. Battleships are powerful without a doubt, but once they incur serious damage, they need to be sent back to a dry dock and occupy it for many months at a time in order to repair it. Meanwhile, most sub-capital ships can be repaired by smaller repair yards in a month or less without necessarily needing to occupy an expensive dry dock. The two chatted a bit more, unheeding of the time they spent or whether they had any other appointments on their agenda. VS actually grew comfortable enough with the trade broker that they soon addressed each other on a first-name basis. Raoul Ottaviani clearly wanted to turn VS and the Larkinson clan into his latest persistent trading partners. This would grant an insane boost to Ottaviani and partners, as it would be able to attract powerful parties to come and use the trade brokerage firm to arrange potential business deals with the Larkinsons. VS saw no reason to reject this proposition, though he did not hold ultimate decision-making power over the clan anymore. Since the new matriarch came into power, VS tried his best to remind the trade broker that he should make contact with the Saint Commander directly in order to establish a fixed partnership. She might not decide to work with Ottaviani and partners for whatever reason. It all depended on her judgment. Raoul's eyes seemed to sparkle as he observed VS deferring to the leadership of the Ace Commander. I will certainly do as you say. Your introduction is all I need to get past her secretaries. It is noteworthy to see that you have truly shifted your leadership responsibilities to the Ace Commander that you have brought up for more than a decade. VS frowned. What are you implying? The trade broker quickly held up his palms. Please forgive me, VS. I do not mean to imply or insinuate anything unpleasant. It is just that rumors are circulating about the abrupt and unexpected leadership transition of your clan. What are the gossip mongers saying? They are claiming that your own subjects rebelled against you and usurped your leadership. The details of these rumors vary, but the gist of it is that your decision to step down was anything but voluntary. These stories also claim that there are Larkinsons who harbor different ambitions and have been longing to cast you away so that they can remake the clan in their own image. Raoul Ottaviani studied VS carefully to discern whether these rumors were accurate. The situation of the clan was quite clear to VS, but the same could not be said for outsiders. It was not as if the Larkinsons publicly aired their political and personal affairs to the public. They tended to be quite close to each other, but a lot more aloof towards outsiders. Most clansmen no longer even had any contact with any outsiders. The Larkinsons had become the only community that mattered to them. They had very little need to interact and socialize with people they could not trust. Would you like to make a comment? It would be best if you issued a statement to clarify any doubts that your customers, suppliers, and other people may harbor. I can tell you that the rumors are depressing sales of your living mech corporation. VS frowned for a minute but took a deep breath and let go of his concerns. That will not be necessary. The press statements published by the Larkinson clan already contain the essential facts. I have nothing to add to that. If the clan sees a need to provide additional clarification, then it will do so at its own leisure. I have better things to do with my time. The trade broker obviously disagreed. Are you certain about this? It may sound banal, but rumors can lead people to form prejudices that are detrimental to your business affairs. I can tell you with confidence that the doubts related to your decision to step away from office has led at least half a dozen potential trading partners from refusing to consider any potential trades. Then that is their loss. VS snorted while crossing his arms. I am not pleased with this circumstance, but if this is how they respond to unverified rumors, then they are obviously not farsighted enough to do business with. I hope they reconsider on their own, but if not, I am sure you can find substitutes. Raoul slightly grimaced. That is not as easy as you think. Half of our trading partners offer unique goods and services that only they can deliver. You may be able to find alternatives that can meet your demands, but their cost and quality leaves much to be desired. They continued to chat for a bit before VES finally decided to proceed with actual business. Enough, he said while raising his palm. As much as I appreciate your insights of the local and regional business climate, I have contracted your services with the aim of finding rare and valuable goods that I have specified. Please present your findings to me. I have been waiting for days to hear what you have found. Raoul Ottaviani immediately switched to a more professional demeanor. Why certainly, sir. Let me start with an alien relic that should offer considerable research value of your inclinations. The trade broker projected a highly detailed image of a black alien ornament of sorts. It did not match the common alien art styles that he knew of. From what he could see, it may have been an idol, but the relic sustained enough damage and erosion that many of its identifying characteristics had been worn away. It would have been great if he could study the relic in person, but that was not an option this time. VS could have gleaned a lot more information by utilizing his other senses if that was the case. So what is special about this relic? He asked. As far as we can determine, it contains the soul, or at least the remnant of it, of an alien being. We cannot determine his or her identity or species. Its current owner had repeatedly tried and failed to make contact. The only result gained from these attempts was to damage the relic even further. I suppose that is why the owner wants to sell it. VS made a guess. He doesn't have any confidence in extracting any value from this alien trinket, so he wants to sell it so that he can recoup his investment and maybe earn a profit while he still can. That is an understandable decision. Not everyone has the expertise to convert exotic relics into a useful and valuable possession. Are you interested in this relic? If you wish to acquire it, I can contact the seller and arrange a meeting if both of you are amenable to a personal meeting. If not, my brokerage firm will serve as an intermediary. This is a good option to choose if you cannot stay in Jernstall or if you wish to hide your identity. That will not be necessary, VS said as he dismissively waved his hand. I will stay here until my eldest daughter has celebrated her birthday, so I still have enough time to meet with these potential trading partners. As far as this relic is concerned, I am curious, but this is not a must-have for me. I still have a lot of skepticism towards it. Not every remnant alien soul is worth studying and reviving. The serious damage represents the loss of vital knowledge and memories. VS was admittedly interested, but not to the point of paying a fortune to secure this prize. He modulated his words to inform the trade broker that he was not willing to be too generous to obtain this damaged and half-broken relic. Understood, Raoul said. I shall convey your sentiments but proceed with arranging a meeting. Thank you for reading my work. If you wish to support the Mech Touch, please vote with your golden tickets. Purchase privilege for the Mech Touch. Read a varying amount of chapters ahead of regular readers while enjoying a 99% discount on unlocking new chapters. Join the Mech Touch's unofficial Discord server, https://discord.gg/apb5kcu. Chapter 7073, Relic of the Sixth Star Emperor. Chapter 7073, Relic of the Sixth Star Emperor. The alien relic did not earn a lot of appreciation from VS. That was because he had no indication of where it came from, which race created it, and what sort of remnant soul had managed to cling to life with its aid. The benefits that VES could gain from this trinket were too questionable relative to its estimated asking price. Even if VES liked to take a gamble every now and then, that did not necessarily mean he wanted to become known as a gullible fool who could easily be convinced into overpaying for stuff. He had a lot of items on his wishlist. If word got around that he was bad at bargaining and did not understand the real value of goods on offer, then he would soon find himself paying twice, thrice, or even 10 times more than what he got in return. His eyes sharpened as he gazed at Raoul Ottaviani. VS had a feeling that this initial offering served as a test. The self-made trade broker deliberately presented an item that barely stretched his willingness to make a bid on it. How VS chose to respond to it would say much about his appraisement skills, his negotiating skills, and his ability to control his emotions. Perhaps VES may not be a consummate businessman who could easily act in a nature that was completely opposite to his true self, but he was no stranger to performing a specific role. He had to remind himself that Raoul Ottaviani was not on his side. Not truly. The man was a broker who earned a living by connecting buyers to sellers and vice versa. The trade broker was not an agent to either party. No, that was not quite true. He had a vested interest in helping sellers succeed as he earned a commission based on the money or value expressed in MTA credits changed hands. This not only incentivized the trade broker to persuade a buyer like VES to accept the transaction, but also encouraged him to overpay as much as possible. It might not sound fair, but this was how the Jernstallers played this game. They perfected it as they facilitated trade between first-raters up to and including the Terrans and the Rabarthans. VES could enjoy the same advantages if he turned into a seller as well. That was what kept trade brokers in everyone's good books. They managed their relationships carefully and made sure to find a way to make a buyer regain their satisfaction by profiting through other means. Of course, the premise of all of this was that the trade broker continued to earn his commissions through every transaction that took place under his supervision. Sure, his clients may seek to conduct repeat business with the trading partners that Ottaviani introduced to them, but there was always a demand for the services of a trade brokerage firm. Jernstall was too big and new entrants like VES showed up all of the time. After reminding himself of his positioning and the positioning of Ottaviani and partners, VES made a gesture with his hand. Please present the next item to me, please. Raul Ottaviani smoothly changed the projection to show an item that stirred immediate interest from the target audience. This is a damaged, incomplete, and partially burned banner that used to symbolize the might and authority of the sixth-star emperor of the new Rubarth Empire. Raul spoke in a serious tone. Despite its outwardly shabby appearance, there are enough intact portions left to repurpose this cloth into an object of the dimensions that you have specified. The damaged banner only appears dark and covered with soot because its present owner and those that came before decided to preserve its original condition. If you choose to acquire it, then you may clean it however you desire. The underlying threads are completely undamaged due to their rare and precious material composition. VS stared intently at this damaged banner. Even if the projection could not convey it, he knew that it carried the marks of history. This was a banner that had once generated pride among the Rubarthans. Now it only evoked shame and regret, and that was solely due to the failures of the sixth-star emperor. What used to be the significance of this banner? Have you verified its provenance? Raul had all of the answers. The damaged banner is one that has hung in the very throne room of the new Rubarth Empire since the time of the late Imperial Majesty's ascension to the Coldstone throne. If you rewatch historical footage of the broadcasts of the throne room from that time period, you may see glimpses of it. Ottaviani and partners has thoroughly examined the banner and concluded that it is the genuine article beyond reasonable doubt. I can transmit the documents that explain our analysis and conclusion. A banner that hung in the legendary throne room of what used to be one of the most powerful human empires in the old galaxy. VS felt his desire for this historical relic growing by the second. This was good because it indicated that he could definitely think of a way to make good use of this precious item. It was also bad because showing too much interest in this banner meant that the seller could demand a higher price that VS would have to swallow in order to secure this unique prize. What is it made of, and who would possibly want to sell such a precious historic relic? The threads that make up the banner are made out of the back fur of a rare but exceptionally powerful mammalian exobeast that resides in the Milky Way galaxy. The species has evolved on a planet that is rich with a certain combination of exotic resources. The Arxelin rex species somehow managed to evolve stronger and more resistant bodies through forming fur out of combining these exotics in a unique and mysterious fashion. The Arxelin rex have been able to dominate their ecosystem as a result, as they have proven themselves to be almost invincible against the other exobeast species. While Raul explained the origins of the thread, a second projection appeared that showed a savage exobeast that was the size of at least several mechs squashed together. This creature radiated power. Even if the Arxelin rex species grew up in a low-energy environment, that merely meant that it was incapable of mutating rapidly like the creatures of the Red Ocean. The exobeasts of the Milky Way instead relied almost entirely on the power of Earth along with traditional evolution. While most exobeasts across the old galaxy did not possess any remarkable or powerful traits, there were always outliers. The Milky Way was so big that these exceptions grew numerous enough for humans to find plenty of interesting creatures to hunt and break down into rare and precious resources. The Arxelin rex species is filled with so many powerful exotics that every part of their bodies are organic marvels. Raul continued to explain. That has also led to an overhunting phenomenon that has almost caused it to go extinct. Cooler heads from the Galactic Hunting Club prevailed and took concrete measures to protect its home planet, but the exobeasts never quite recovered. This adds to the rarity and preciousness of this banner. Even if we can engage in limited trade with the old galaxy, it is highly unlikely you can obtain this kind of fabric because its existing owners refuse to part with it. Their most protective clothing is woven with this thread. The trade broker certainly did a good job of hyping up the value of this fabric. VS could already feel the price tag increasing with every additional spoken word. Since this fabric is so tough, why give it away at all? VS repeated his question. Because the seller, who happens to be a Rubarthan of high standing, has little need for a historical relic that is only gathering dust in a vault or a museum, Professor. Times are tough these days. The Rubarthan Pact is beset by not one but two powerful enemies. It is not that useful to recycle the fabric of this banner in order to make protective clothing, because the life of any single individual that is weak enough to benefit from its defenses is inconsequential to the war effort. It is also taboo for a Rubarthan to break down an imperial banner of such historical significance. Then there is a separate taboo for making use of an object that once represented the sixth-star emperor. The Disaster Star. VS voiced the title that this infamous Rubarthan sovereign had earned during his lifetime. Nearly every Rubarthan had a negative opinion about this infamous former sovereign. The Disaster Star oversaw the descent of his empire towards depravity. He had been utterly unable to prevent his own admirals from going rogue and bombarding planets for reasons that most contemporary people would consider flimsy. What was worse was that the Disaster Star was unable to resist the explosive rise of the Mech Trade Association and the Common Fleet Alliance. Rebarthan spacers who once pledged allegiance to him had forsaken their oaths and turned into fleeters. They used the Empire's powerful battleships and other warships against their former masters and won. This shame could never be erased from the legacy and historical record of the Rebarthan people. They all lived in the shadow of the disaster star's blunders and failures. It was a small miracle that the Imperial Rebarthan household could still remain standing after everything that happened. Fortunately, the 7-star emperor that reigned to this day was doing a far better job than his father. It was a pity that his authority only extended as far as the old galaxy. That did not mean that he was off the hook. Many Rebarthans, most notably the survivors of the final days of the Age of Conquest, still watched their Imperial Majesty vigilantly for any signs that he might falter. The trauma of those calamitous years still haunted far too many people. Even now, after the Rebarthans of the New Frontier managed to pry their sovereignty back from the Red II, they still remained highly vigilant towards the Meshers and the Fleeters, afraid that history might repeat at any time in the future. It was understandable that the current owner, who presumably had to be a Rebarthan prince or a member of Rebarthan high society, wished to part with the symbol of Rebarthan failure and impotence. The imperial banner may have served as an adequate reminder of the descendants of those turbulent times, but that did not help with resisting the advance of the native aliens and the mutated Vorabugs. A potential buyer like VES did not have to deal with all of the stigma. He was not a Rebarthan after all. Perhaps a few people might kick up a fuss, but the Rebarthans had much more pressing issues to deal with than a mech designer tearing apart a relic that they would secretly like to destroy anyway. VES folded his hands. I would like to obtain the data concerning the performance of this special fabric to understand how much damage it can resist. Since it is not a transphasic or superdimensional, it is not necessarily the most damage-resistant fabric in the Red Ocean. Raul Ottaviani nodded. That may be true, but the fibers that comprise this Rebarthan banner do not come with the complications that make it difficult or even dangerous to place transphasic or superdimensional items too close to a fragile human body. The threads made out of the fur of the Arxelin rex species are known to be nearly absolutely inert. They do not even stain as any dirt slides off their surface. Well, you can contact the seller and let him or her know that I am interested in acquiring this banner. Much will depend on what I can make out of this shameful relic. I shall do so, Professor. Please take into account that it is unlikely that you can purchase this banner with MTA credits, phase water, or other widely available resources. The seller has needs that are greater than funding. You will know more when you finally meet the party in question. I look forward to this meeting then. Thank you for reading my work. If you wish to support the Mech Touch, please vote with your golden tickets. Purchase privilege for the Mech Touch. Read a varying amount of chapters ahead of regular readers while enjoying a 99% discount on unlocking new chapters. Join the Mech Touch's unofficial Discord server, https://discord.gg/apb5kcu. Chapter 7074, Fire Heart Tissue. Chapter 7074, Fire Heart Tissue. After introducing a very valuable relic in the form of the damaged Imperial banner of the 6th-star Emperor, Raul Ottaviani began to present a number of less astonishing goods. These enthusiasm cooled as he beheld the items that the trade broker had curated. Each of them were valuable in different ways. They just did not fit his needs as well as he hoped. These goods encompass powerful exotics, rare hypers, a handful of alien relics, incomplete chi cultivation scriptures, and samples of exoplanets and exobeasts. The trade broker was able to offer a surprising amount of the latter. The claim that Ottaviani and partners built up a good relationship with the Hunting Association appeared to be true. There was no way that Raul was able to present so many different organs of powerful alien exoflora and exofauna without getting into the good books of the hunters. Unfortunately, these organs were so weird that it would take far too much trouble for VES to figure out what to do with them. Just because they held power did not necessarily mean that he could graft them onto a mech and call it a day. It took a lot of expertise and understanding to decipher them and learn how to extract the stuff that was the source of their power. It was similar to the trouble with phase water organs. The Larkinson clan managed to harvest another batch of mostly pristine phase water organs from the Battle of Screed Tanner 6F, but all of them would probably remain stored in the freezers for a very long time. The Larkinson Biotech Institute lacked the expertise to quickly and efficiently understand the more complicated phase water organs and convert them into human-compatible ones. The same applied to all of these bizarre organs. So what if he came across a gland that could produce a highly acidic slime that could dissolve transphasic and even superdimensional matter? Without understanding the cause behind this effect and finding out how to increase the potency of the dangerous slime, it would take forever for its application to melt a hole through a warship hull. Another organ that sounded valuable but was actually pretty useless to him was the fin of an aquatic calamity beast. It possessed the strange property of increasing the acceleration of a mech by 40% and larger vehicles by a lower percentage proportionate to their mass. This might be a priceless relic to certain clients, but VES already had access to Lucky's gems. He knew that the effects of these gadgets were strong for standard mechs and useful for expert mechs, but mostly lost their power for ace mechs because a Saint Kingdom overpowered everything. Since that was the case, VES had little reason to bid for the fin. The only other excuse to purchase it was that it was not restricted to mechs. Yet even then he declined to acquire it because it was not cost-effective to use this expensive calamity beat organ on anything else. As Raoul received rejection after rejection, he did not look surprised. He maintained a professional demeanor and did not convey any disappointment. This was the reality of his business. Trade brokers tried their best to match buyers to sellers, but the nature of their demands were so strange that the two sides simply had no way of reconciling their demands with each other's bottom lines. A case like this took place when Raoul presented an object of undeniable value to VES. It was a heart. An alien heart, to be precise. VES happened to be familiar enough with phase whale physiology to recognize it came from this species. The heart was massive in scale. It was a giant biological engine of power that ensured that phase water-infused blood flowed through every vein of the phase whale's titanic body. What was unusual about this heart was that it was on fire. The projection did not show a still image, but a video capture. Even when it was secured in a special preservation chamber, the heart still blazed with strong fire energy. What the hell is this? VES eventually asked. Did a phase whale experiment on himself by trying to leverage the fire element and actually turn his heart into a furnace that eventually got himself killed? Not quite, Professor. The greater phase whale who this heart belongs to was a casualty of the Red War. In his death throes, he wanted to deny his human opponents the opportunity to carve into his carcass and cut away his precious phase water organs. He used the last drops of his power to teleport himself into the local star and surrender his true body to the searing flames. What a brave decision. The greater phase whale probably made the best choice under the circumstances, as it was well known that humans were able to squeeze a lot of benefits from the corpses of phase leaders. Given that this burning heart exists, I take it that the phase whale's attempt to deny resources to red humanity has failed. VS stated. Correct. The forces at the scene only retrieved a handful of remnants. Bones mostly. This heart is by far the most notable exception. It is a mutated organ that has technically died but still shows signs of activity. Attempts have been made to transplant it into a starship, but it has failed to act as an enhanced power generator due to the fact that it is dead. The owners therefore proceeded to slice small to moderate pieces from the organic anomaly. The tissue samples harvested through this process boast a number of useful and exceptional properties. The trade broker transferred a report to VES that detailed exactly what the abnormal tissue samples were capable of. Even if they were cut into ribbons, the thin flesh of the enormous heart was still able to produce a surprising amount of fire energy by converting it from other energies. VES studied the data carefully. He also began to visualize how he should work with it and how he could convert it into a useful component to his upcoming Prometheus Mark II design. It would be difficult but not impossible to turn it into a source of fire energy that could push the Prometheus Mark II to the next level. VES did not know if the LBI was up to the task of performing the biological transformations necessary to turn it into a functional, stable, and controllable mech part. He may have to approach the transhumanist faction or maybe the Red Collective to do the job. I need to disclose additional information to you, Raoul Ottaviani said in a slighter, graver tone than before. The seller has demanded a steep price for this exceptional fire element heart tissue. He demands a quantity of weapon-grade superdimensional matter that is 100 times the mass of the quantity of fire heart tissue that you wish to acquire. If you want to obtain 5 kilograms of fire heart tissue, then the seller expects to receive 500 kilograms of weapon-grade superdimensional matter. Absurd. VS shot to his feet and almost slammed his fists against his desk as he heard this outrageous demand. Weapon-grade superdimensional matter is the most precious strategic good in this dwarf galaxy. God pilots can practically kill anything if their armaments are upgraded with them. Their immense might is proportionate to their scarcity. There is so little of it in the blue dimension that even a kilogram is precious enough to hurt us if we have lost track of it. This fire heart tissue is admittedly interesting to me, but I will not squander the strategic resources of our clan when I can look for many other substitutes that are also strong in fire energy. Weapon-grade superdimensional matter cannot be substituted by anything. The trade broker nodded slightly. That is the case for now. It may be different in the future. Are you certain of your decision? VS resolutely repeated his stance. The final decision does not rest with me, but I cannot imagine that the new matriarch of our clan will agree to squander so much high-grade superdimensional matter for organic tissue that is available in much greater quantities. I do not believe for a second that other buyers have paid a price that is close to what the seller has asked. There are many more cost-effective sources of fire energy available. I just need to be patient enough and wait for other opportunities to arrive. In any case, I have no immediate demand for it yet. I can wait months to obtain a more reasonable and affordable alternative. Raoul nodded in understanding. Very well. I shall convey your words to the seller. Depending on the reaction, you may or may not receive a second offer. Do you think it is likely to happen? To be honest, no, the trade broker said after a short pause. The fire heart may be enormous, but it is an utterly unique and remarkable biological marvel. Nobody can explain its birth. It should have been impossible for the heart of the phase whale to survive the intense heat of a star, let alone transform into an element that is as far removed from the phase whales as you can think of. It is impossible to replicate the chain of coincidences and stroke of luck that has produced such a unique marvel. Every slice of tissue that gets removed from the heart represents a permanent reduction in reserves. This resource will eventually run out, forcing clients such as yourself to seek other alternatives. VS did not look impressed. That is a nice story, but I do not have to wait until this fire heart has been cut apart in its entirety for me to look for alternatives. My requirements aren't too strict or specific. I would be happy if I could get a space rock, a strange hypermaterial, or even the first flame's tears. It matters not as long as it is compact and can produce a stable and constant output of fire energy. He wanted to make it very clear that he did not appreciate the attempt to rip off the Larkinson clan. Even if Raoul managed to fool VS, it was useless so long as there was someone in the Larkinson clan that was smart and shrewd enough to recognize how stupid it was to accept the trade. Hopefully, VS was able to make all of that clear and thereby prevent potential sellers from inflating their demands to such a ridiculous degree. Raoul Ottaviani spread his arms. The fire heart tissue is the final item that we have been able to identify and present to you. We can find more matches for you in a number of days, but this is the extent of what we are able to deliver to you at this early stage. I am pleased with the service that you have provided so far, VS said. I understand that stuff like this takes time. You are the first trade broker to present trading opportunities to me, and I appreciate how quickly you have been able to deliver. I may not have agreed to look deeper in most of the items available for trade, but it is good that there are at least a couple of hits. I shall do my best to present a more relevant selection of trading goods to you in our next meeting, Raoul solemnly said. Now that I have met you in person and gauged your reactions to different items, I have a better understanding of your interests and your budget. The more often we meet, the better I can calibrate future selections according to your needs. We hope that you will retain our services on an ongoing basis. I can promise you that other trade brokerage firms are not as timely as us, and very few of them possess as close of a connection with the Hunting Association than Ottaviani and Partners. VS did not have a strong opinion on this matter. We shall see. As I have said, you are the first trade broker that I have met. Your speed is commendable, but results matter as well. I will withhold my judgment and let your competitors have a chance to prove themselves. Thank you for reading my work. If you wish to support the Mech Touch, please vote with your golden tickets. Purchase privilege for the Mech Touch. Read a varying amount of chapters ahead of regular readers, while enjoying a 99% discount on unlocking new chapters. Join the Mech Touch's unofficial Discord server. https://discord.gg/apb5kcu. Chapter 7075, The First Barter. Chapter 7075, The First Barter. Coordinating the trades was a bit troublesome. Since VS was no longer the patriarch of the clan, his current status in the clan was that of a mech designer who operated beyond Gloriana's authority. That turned him into a free agent inside the clan, but also separated him from the hierarchy and its many levers. In practice, that meant that VS had to ask Casella for permission if he wanted to borrow key personnel, retrieve a valuable resource from the strategic vaults, or draw upon a huge amount of clan funds. The good news was that VS did not have to turn to the clan for everything. He had amassed a huge personal fortune. The problem was that money alone was not enough to exchange the rare and precious goods on offer. For the first time in centuries, the MTA credit and the CFA credit had become subject to inflation. Couldn't be helped. The RA and the RF no longer maintained absolute dominion over human space anymore. They could no longer extract tribute from the Terran Alliance and the Rubarthan Pact. Their spending continually increased. They exceeded every deficit limit that they previously imposed on themselves and went deeper into debt to produce more war material and train more soldiers for the wars raging across the borders of human-occupied space. The Red 2 also pressured their researchers and developers to innovate and develop new wonder weapons to use against the native aliens and the mutated Vorabugs. All of that cost a lot of funding as well. Many R&D institutions had turned into black holes where money kept disappearing without producing anything of substance in the short term. Whether that might change in a few years was anyone's guess. Increased spending and decreasing revenue were not the only reasons why the top human currencies fell from their thrones and began to roll around in the dirt that they previously tried to avoid. People simply lost confidence in the value of the MTA credit and CFA credit. This was an understandable reaction. During times of crisis, stacking lots of money in a bank account was one of the least useful ways to protect oneself. This was just hoarding wealth without converting it into anything concrete and useful enough to win the necessary battle and ensure one's own survival. This was also why the Red 2 spent so much, even if they knew that they were contributing to the hollowing out of their own precious currencies. Compared to maintaining the value and confidence of the MTA credit and the CFA credit, the Meshers and Fleeters would much rather obtain more mechs and warships to defend their borders and squash any alien invaders that attempted to chip away at the Red Ocean Union. There were many ways they could come back from a debt crisis and a hyperinflationary spiral if it came to that. What they could not recover from was to see all of their territories devoured by the aliens and their armed forces shattered beyond recovery. In short, during a time of war, it was better to have lots of mechs and warships on hand rather than piles of unused cash. While few people would argue that the meshers and the fleeters made the wrong decision, the reality of the situation was that a lot of other people effectively paid for their profligacy. Inflation of the more unusual and unexpected variety was a tax on everyone else who possessed and depended on cash. They might still earn the same amount of money in terms of numbers, but when their value had dropped by 30%, then the Red Two effectively robbed them of all of that wealth and used it for their own purposes. The only reason why few people objected to this behavior was because it was for a good cause. The Red Two ultimately spent their money wisely and did everything in their power to defend the core territories that maintained their allegiance to the old order. That did not mean that everyone was happy that they were being exploited by the current economic reality. Suffice to say, the people and organizations that suffered the most from this hidden tax or more nefariously a form of legalized theft were those that possessed a huge cash reserve. VS and to a lesser extent the Larkinson clan fell into this category. It sucked because VS was rapidly seeing his real wealth diminish by the day. His reluctance in spending his money on real estate and colonization may have saved him from concerns about the native aliens raising his expensive efforts into dust, but it also left him bereft of more value-retaining resources. Hard currencies such as phase water, strategic resources, mechs and warships mattered a lot more these days. The biggest players increasingly eschewed cash as an exchange medium and resorted more and more on barter to obtain what they needed the most. It was a primitive and inefficient means of exchange, but this was the best that they could do under the circumstances. VS had no choice but to play by the rules of the game. That became very clear when VS entered a luxury hotel and entered a small and elegant conference room in order to meet with the seller of the damaged imperial banner. The Rubarthans had already half taken over the hotel. They replaced all of the security personnel with their own troops, and they had even found a way to station their mechs at the perimeter. Naturally, the mechs of the Blue Jay fleet arrived as well and constantly kept an eye on their Rubarthan counterparts. VS arrived in his most formal outfit, which was the one he wore during the transfer of power to the new matriarch. Lucky accompanied him as well. The gem cat would rather spend time with the kids, but VS needed his pet in order to help him examine the imperial banner and verify its material composition. Meow. Don't worry about it. These mechs and soldiers can't do anything to us, he said with a reasonable amount of confidence. The possibility that this might be an elaborate attempt to assassinate him was not zero, but VS was confident that it wouldn't work. Even if the meshers were completely caught off guard and reacted incompetently to an ambush, VS still had plenty of ways to defend himself. He was a lesser phase lord and had plenty of tricks up his sleeve. If it came down to it, VS did not mind letting Sev out of his cage and rampage to his heart's content. That shouldn't happen today. The Rubarthans were in dire straits and needed all of the goodwill they could get from others. Even rogue elements among them had to restrain themselves in order to save their newly independent polity from collapsing. As VS entered the conference room after going through a thorough but ultimately useless security inspection, he encountered a familiar and unfamiliar face. "Good morning, VS," Raul Ottaviani said as he made a short bow. "You have come just in time. Let me introduce you to one of my Rubarthan trading partners. This is Mech General Harman Raider Kavaliauskas, patriarch of the Raider Kavaliauskas family and its most senior military official. The Raider Kavaliauskas family, or RK family for short, has always been a loyal retainer to the Smokestack Principality. It is a pleasure to meet with you, General." VS extended his hand. The older and much more stockier man gripped his hand tightly and shook. "You honor us by your visit," the Rubarthan gruffly responded. As they went through their introductions, VS discreetly used his cranial implant to pull off information about the general from the galactic net. Any Rubarthan that was prominent enough to become a mech general in the hierarchy of the Rubarthan Pact should definitely have a large public profile. According to the information that VS obtained, the Raider Kavaliauskas family existed for a long time, but only became prominent after the Smokestack Prince elevated it into a trusted position. This was an important detail, as the Smokestack Prince was the strongest rival to the Inferno Spear Prince in the competition to ascend to the recently made red-stained throne. In any case, the 476th Prince raised the RKS to become his guard dogs, which meant that he could easily put them down if he wished. This put the family in a rather precarious position. They had long attempted to branch out, but they could not do so openly for fear of earning Prince Titus' mistrust. The mech general standing in front of VS was known as a strong and unflinchingly loyal retainer of the Smokestack Prince. This was important as the latter's non-military inclinations left him with relatively few trusted military officials by his side. The reason why Major General Harman traveled to Jernstall at this time was to engage in the mass procurement of essential goods and services to help the Rubarthan Pact survive the difficult months ahead. In order to fund all of these procurements, the Major General brought plenty of stuff that the Rubarthans had stashed in their vaults and museums for a long time. The imperial banner was just one of many trade goods that they sought to use as barter. After VS and Harmon completed their superficial chatter, they quickly moved on to business. Both of them were busy people and neither of them liked to waste their time. The general and the trade broker led VS to the center of the room where a highly secure protective container floated in the air. General Harmon solemnly proceeded to undergo the rigorous steps to unlock the container. Once its lid shifted open, VS was able to behold the folded banner in all of its glory. Its impression in reality was so much richer and more vivid than the high-resolution image capture that VS had studied previously. The banner was indeed in bad condition. It used to be fairly large, but so much of it had burned away that the intact amounts of fabric were much smaller in size. VS did not touch it, but he could feel the weight of history and the complex sentiments attached to this broken symbol of authority. He could already tell its material qualities were excellent, but what VS valued just as much was the hopes, dreams, disappointments and loathing that a huge number of Rebarthans had directed towards this banner and the sovereign it used to represent. That accumulation of multiple generations' worth of humans subtly elevated an object that had no right to be an artifact into a relic that possessed a disproportionately strong spiritual weight. VS could make use of that. He could rely on his specialization and spiritual engineering to convert this dormant and unused reserve of complementing and contradictory energies into a powerful application. He already began to entertain a lot of ideas, a few of which were more dangerous and risky than others. While his desire to obtain this imperial banner had spiked, VS tried his best not to let that show in his reactions. He maintained a neutral stance and demeanor and did his best to pretend that the banner was useful but anything but essential. "What do you think, Lucky?" "Meow." Lucky did not show the slightest amount of interest. The banner was made out of organic fabrics. Even if the threads were laced with strong metallic exotics, that did not change the fact that it used to be the fur of a long-dead exobeast. Lucky would rather eat a lump of weapon-grade superdimensional matter rather than take a bite out of reprocessed hair. "So what do you want for it, General?" VS asked directly. "What most people want from you and your clan. Superdimensional matter, the high-grade variety." VS immediately grimaced. "No. Out of the question. As interesting as this historical object may be, it is not worth any quantity of the strongest resource in the Red Ocean. You can settle for the mid-grade variety or ask for an entirely different good, but we will not exchange armor or weapon-grade superdimensional matter for this exchange. Thank you for reading my work. If you wish to support the Mech Touch, please vote with your golden tickets. Purchase privilege for the Mech Touch. Read a varying amount of chapters ahead of regular readers, while enjoying a 99% discount on unlocking new chapters. Join the Mech Touch's unofficial Discord server. https://discord.gg/apb5kcu. Chapter 7076. Fire Sale. Chapter 7076. Fire Sale. Period of haggling ensued. Both sides had strong needs and limited resources at their disposal. There was no way they were willing to sacrifice a fortune only to receive a pittance. The problem that both sides faced was the difficulty of appraising the value of the goods on barter. What was the worth of a kilogram of weapon-grade superdimensional matter? 1 billion MTA credits? 1 trillion MTA credits? Nobody knew. Nobody ever paid money to acquire superdimensional matter. They only ever paid in goods, in knowledge, and in costly favors. Those concessions were also difficult to price because their value fluctuated greatly depending on the changes in the environment, the economic conditions of human space, and how well humans fared in the Red War. In short, there was so much uncertainty surrounding the value of different goods and services that people naturally tried to pin the value of their own concessions at the higher end while doing the opposite for the offerings of other parties. That was how the bartering session basically unfolded. The Rebarthan Mech General tried his best to emphasize the historic significance and material excellence of the imperial banner. It may have been associated with a disgraced Star Emperor, but it was still a genuine imperial relic. Only one of its kind existed in the Red Ocean. Once it was gone, a piece of human history would disappear forever. Even if VS did not care about the historical context, he could not ignore the material properties of the fibers that remained intact. Without relying on hypermaterials, phase water, or superdimensional matter, the fibers made out of the fur of an absurdly strong exobeast could already rank in the top 100 strongest substances known to red humanity. The cloth was like a thick wall that took the form of slightly thick fabric like one would use on a typical coat. VS could think of many possible uses for such a remarkable fabric. Yet the fact of the matter was that the imperial banner was not the only item he needed to fulfill one of his objectives. He made that very clear to the good general. "I am sorry, General, but we truly cannot agree on exchanging any of our high-grade superdimensional matter for this banner," VS calmly said as he maintained an impassive expression. "The only reason why I am interested in your item is because I need to acquire a modest quantity of high-quality fabric to create a special birthday gift for my eldest daughter. I have no interest in the story behind the banner. I just want to unravel the threads and weave them into a different form. I also intend to dye them into a different color, so nothing of its previous incarnation will be left intact. The two continued to negotiate with each other. VS constantly downplayed the uniqueness of the banner while the general did the opposite. In the end, VS managed to shift the balance in his favor. His negotiating strategy worked because it was based on the truth. Superdimensional matter, and especially the high-grade ones, possessed undeniable value. Even smaller quantities could be incredibly useful, as they could be used to make virtually impenetrable piloting suits, combat armor, or a protective external cockpit shell. Given the many valuable uses for armor-grade and weapon-grade superdimensional matter, it was difficult to argue that VS should fork over a lot of it in order to acquire what most people would probably regard as a luxury product in this day and age. VS eventually managed to bargain down the price to just 4,700 kilograms of hull-grade superdimensional matter. As far as mid-grade superdimensional matter was concerned, this was not a particularly large quantity, but it was not trivial either. Even if the mid-grade stuff could not match the performance of the high-grade stuff, it vastly outperformed the best transphasic alloys in most areas, which meant that it still held a large amount of intrinsic value. It could easily be used to upgrade the personal protection of dozens of ace mech pilots, thereby increasing their survival chances in the event that their ace mechs fell in battle. After all, most ace pilots that met their end in recent times usually found their ace mechs impaled by St. Piercer arms. The alien-grade superdimensional weapons cut straight through true resonance and pierced through transphasic hyper-armor plating as easily as cutting through a thick layer of butter. Facing such threats, ace pilots often had to face sudden lethal peril that they could not effectively resist with the tools that they normally had at their disposal. In these cases, being able to add a thin layer of hull-grade superdimensional armor to the exterior of the cockpit of the front of the torso was enough to impede the tip of a St. Piercer, just enough to stall or at least impede its forward momentum. This was enough. As long as the ace pilot was able to react fast enough, he or she should be able to withdraw to safety so long as the ace mech still remained functional enough. That should drastically improve the survival rates of the ace pilots in question. This was a matter of great strategic importance to the Rubarthan Pact, whose declaration of independence had left it bereft of the protection previously offered by the Meshers and the Fleeters. Sure, the Rubarthans had already negotiated a deal with the Cybernetic Empire for military assistance, but at what cost? It was not cheap for the Cybers to construct so many mechs and warships. Activating the translocation gate to rapidly deploy their warfleets to the Rubarthan Pact also came with a price. The Polymath would never let the Rubarthans freeload at her expense. The less the Rubarthans were able to defend their own borders, the more they had to surrender their wealth and resources to the hungry cybernetic empire. If beleaguered Rubarthans did not shape up quickly, they would soon find themselves hollowing out their foundation, while also contributing to the ascension of the cybernetic empire as the premier human power in the Red Ocean. This had to be prevented at all costs, so the Rubarthan had become truly desperate to expand and strengthen their armed forces in every way possible. VS understood their position and the heavy pressure they endured, so he did not hesitate to exploit their unfavorable circumstance and come away with a deal that he found more than acceptable. The Larkin Sun clan might not necessarily think that way, though. To him, the Imperial banner possessed great value because he was confident he could convert it into added protection for his daughter. However, this was a personal desire. The Larkin Sun clan had greater needs. Exchanging almost 5 tons of mid-grade superdimensional matter for an upgrade that had no bearing on the modern battlefield was not necessarily a favorable deal. The Larkin Sun clan's remaining reserves of hull-grade superdimensional matter dwindled even further. If VS conducted more exchanges like this, then there was a very real risk that the clan would run out of mid-grade superdimensional matter a lot sooner than the high-grade variety. After all, the clan had to wait until they were ready to upgrade the right mechs in order to use up its reserves of armor and weapon-grade superdimensional matter. These resources were far too valuable to be squandered on ordinary projects. It was a good thing that Casella was on his side. He only had to send a brief message detailing the exchange to her and wait a few minutes before receiving her assent. The deal went through. "You drive a hard bargain," Mech General Harman Raider Kavaliauskas eventually said as he symbolically shook hands with VS. "I cannot say that our princes will be happy when they learn about this result, but it is clear that you have done your homework. I am glad that we still managed to come to a consensus that my people can barely stomach. Under normal circumstances, we would never agree to part with a historical relic with strong imperial origins so easily, especially considering that you plan to dismantle it for parts." The message was clear. Despite the controversial story behind the imperial banner, the Rubarthans still hoped that VS would treat it with respect. "I am not in the habit of paying a small fortune just to add a useless trophy to my display case," VS calmly responded. "The imperial banner will not exist anymore once it comes into my possession. I have no obligation to preserve your history. You and your people should have already made peace with this reality after you offered it up for exchange." Raoul Ottaviani eventually approached the pair and congratulated them both. "Gentlemen, Thank you for using the services of Ottaviani and Partners. We have already filed the necessary paperwork with the relevant administrations. We still need your signatures on a handful of documents. As per our agreement, our brokerage firm will be receiving a commission in phase water instead of superdimensional matter. It would have been outrageous to pay Ottaviani and Partners even a single gram of superdimensional matter. The major players had all formed a tacit agreement not to let superdimensional matter fall into the hands of smaller players, especially those who were unable to defend their newly gained prizes. This was because even the smallest quantities of superdimensional matter could be used to cause significant harm. Those with ill intentions could use it to produce superdimensional rounds that could punch through nearly any form of energy and physical defenses. VS had already fallen victim to that, so he knew more than most people how important figures including his loved ones could get killed by a well-equipped sniper. This reminded him that he should make sure to equip his wife and children with superdimensional defenses. Their personal Azure energy shield generators no longer offered as much absolute protection as before. In any case, Ottaviani and Partners clearly was not worthy to obtain and make use of superdimensional matter. Raoul was tactful enough to understand this truth, so he easily accepted phase water as an alternative reward for his services. The trade broker showed no sign of discontent. Even if phase water was nowhere near as precious as superdimensional matter, it was still a scarce resource that consistently rose in value over the course of the Red War. Demand for it remained sky-high as everyone needed it to mass-produce transphasic hyper-armor plating, Azure energy shield generators and superdrives. After handling a bit of paperwork, the air between the trading partners began to clear up. The Rubarthan general relaxed and spoke a little more comfortably in V's presence. "You guys still haven't solved your succession crisis?" VS asked in a perplexed voice. "It is not that simple to choose a successor of a newly independent star empire that has yet to complete its reforms," the Raider Kavalioska's patriarch said. "For too long, we have been reliant on the centralized government of the new Rubarth Empire. The pact was never meant to operate outside of active supervision and intervention from the old galaxy. We were almost done with deciding on our new form of governance when the Vorbugs invaded our space. That has caused multiple shocks and radically changed our circumstances." The general was careful not to express any opinion on the chances of which prince was likely to ascend to the throne. "Shouldn't the latest crisis be an impetus for you Rubarthans to finally make up your mind?" VS questioned. "As an outsider, the situation is relatively simple. You can choose to enthrone the Inferno Spear Prince if you want to shape your pact into a militaristic empire. If you want to create a powerful industrial and logistical powerhouse, then the Smokestack Prince is more suitable. If you guys are too divided to pick a polarizing choice, then you can choose a weaker but more neutral candidate such as the Brownstone Prince or the Impresario Prince. Whatever the case, don't keep us all in suspense." General Harmon let out a breath. "I do not disagree with you, but you are not aware of how delicate our political landscape has become. The stakes are too high. Choosing the right leader can lead our pact to greatness or damnation. We cannot afford to make the wrong choice. Thank you for reading my work. If you wish to support the Mech Touch, please vote with your golden tickets. Purchase privilege for the Mech Touch. Read a varying amount of chapters ahead of regular readers, while enjoying a 99% discount on unlocking new chapters. Join the Mech Touch's unofficial Discord server. https://discord.gg/apb5kcu. Chapter 7077. A New Identity. Chapter 7077. A New Identity. The Rubarthans were a strange sort of people. They completely opposed the Terrans and tried to run their government completely differently. Instead of running a decentralized oligopoly where multiple ancient clans all shared power, the Rubarthans liked to elevate a single central leader to a position of supreme authority. One voice, one direction, zero division. At least that was supposed to be the case in theory. VS knew that it worked out a lot messier in practice, but the Rubarthans still clung to the fantasy of answering to a single leader. What complicated this insistence on centralization was the heavy promotion of meritocracy. The Rubarthans believed that any one of them had a chance to ascend to greatness. They should be given a fair opportunity to excel in their studies and prove their worth in their work. This was nearly impossible to realize in practice. Cronyism, favoritism, prejudices, and office politics often caused people to promote their friends and minions above those who deserved the positions more. Such abuses were more prevalent in certain states and organizations. The Red Fleet had recently moved to a much more closer form of a well-functioning meritocracy after letting Archie evaluate its members. The increasingly more sentient and powerful AI effectively gained the power to decide on which fleeters were eligible for promotions. The Rubarthans had not gone that far. Humans still decided who to hire, promote, and fire from their jobs. So long as this remained the case, the Rubarthans could never be truly fair and neutral when dealing with each other. Even so, most Rubarthans tended to be quite fair. Their culture promoted a strong sense of responsibility. Each of them needed to be fair about each other's merits and shortcomings. This was the only way the Rubarthans could overtake the supposedly decadent and corrupt Terrans and become the ultimate masters of the universe. While VS admired the noble and ambitious sentiments of the Rubarthan people, he personally thought that they were too stubborn about clinging to old glories. The new Rubarth Empire had indeed been great during the heyday of the Age of Conquest, but they had declined in power and influence ever since. VS seriously doubted whether the Rubarthans in both the Old Galaxy and the New Frontier had any hope of regaining their former glory. Red humanity was currently living through the Age of Dawn. This was 2 ages past the Age of Conquest. Not only had they arrived in a different time period, but they also found themselves in a completely new galaxy, if only a small one. Why the hell were they still pining after the dream of restoring a star empire that effectively died over 4 centuries ago? Rather than engage in a difficult and most likely futile attempt at necromancy, VS would rather have these people form a new polity that was unburdened by the shameful failures of the past. At least they were making a bit of progress on that front by cleaning out their old stash of undesirable relics. After returning to his compound with his latest prize in tow, he carefully began to study the damaged banner. He first unfolded it and spread it across the floor of his borrowed workshop. The original banner was around as tall as a mech, but only a fraction of its length remained intact. After brushing the surface of ancient soot and ash, he could spot various stylistic elements used by the Rubarthan imperial household. VS had already verified it earlier, but as he touched the banner with his own hands, he could feel its connection to a pivotal period of Rubarthan history most acutely. It was not the main item that symbolized the new Rubarth Empire's dramatic fall from grace, but plenty of people harbored a lot of ill will towards this banner and the sovereign it was supposed to represent. All of those hatreds and regrets caused the banner to become a focal point of negativity. Back in the old galaxy, that translated into nothing more than to subtly stoke the hatreds of any Rubarthans that beheld this damaged relic. Yet it was different in the new frontier. Here, the thoughts and emotions of every sentient being could exert enough power to alter reality. All of the dormant negative emotions embedded into the imperial banner gradually became increasingly more active and significant. VS could not guess what sort of difference they could make, but he doubted that it was anything good. The Rubarthans had made the right choice by getting rid of this banner because it might turn into a source of bad luck if they remained in close proximity. Even VS might fall victim to the vagaries of misfortune if he stayed in its presence for too long. Let's stash it away for the time being. After completing his examination of the banner, he requested for it to be stored in a vault that was hopefully isolated. He already had a good idea of how he wanted to process it and rework it into a canopy for the flower parasol, but he needed to do a lot more preparation work first. VS briefly pulled the artifact in question from his system space. The object's attitude towards him was lukewarm at best. He was clearly not the right person to own it, which was understandable considering its pink canopy. Don't worry. It won't be long until I gift you to my daughter whose company you prefer a lot more. I first need to modernize and transform you into a more suitable protector. Your original was made and used in a very different time and place. Things are completely different here in the Red Ocean. You will need greater protection and reinforcement. Let me show you what I have in mind. VS began to project his draft design for the upgraded flower parasol, giving the high-level artifact a good view of its next iteration. In order to offer the best possible protection to my daughter, I really need to strengthen your capabilities. In my opinion, it is essential to incorporate the strongest materials that we have access to, which is high-grade superdimensional matter. Combining this new material in the form of workable alloys will allow you to keep up with the times and worry a lot less about getting broken into pieces. The flower parasol shook in his hand. I am well aware that you are strongly aspect towards the wood and flower attributes. The careless addition of cold metal alloys can potentially ruin your astonishing formation, which is why I am not trying to replace your parts with it. I would much rather expand you with superdimensional alloys. This way, you get the best of both worlds. You get to keep your powerful runes, but also enjoy the protection of superior metals. The artifact shook harder in his hand. I understand what you are concerned about, which is why I decided to reward you and strengthen you by feeding you powerful explants. This is one of your capabilities, right? You can continually evolve and strengthen yourself by absorbing more and more resilient exoplants. I will do my best to satisfy your hunger, but I expect you to cooperate with me to help integrate superdimensional alloy and other powerful materials into your structure. The flower parasol had clear concerns about whether VS was skilled enough to avoid mistakes and preserve its existing features. Don't worry, I will explain my plans and my steps to you as I work. If you have any objections, then share them with me. We can work this out together. VS was not arrogant enough to know how an artifact like the flower parasol worked. Not even Vulcan knew too much about it, as the incarnation had turned into an all-rounder of sorts. VS and Vulcan would have to learn advanced woodworking skills in order to properly transform a wooden artifact like the flower parasol. It was a good thing that they were not afraid of the challenge. I know that you are already fairly powerful in your current state, but you don't enjoy the benefits of any modern technology and materials. Don't underestimate what I can offer to you. In order to make my daughter safe, I am willing to go all out to turn you into a powerful protective umbrella. VS cared a lot about upgrading the flower parasol. Not only did he want to make it more resistant against powerful attacks, he also wanted to obtain a greater understanding of the nature of ancient cultivation artifacts. The key trait that separated old-school artifacts such as the ocean collar, the flower parasol, and most notably the heaven's word from modern artifacts was the sophisticated use of runes to shape and channel power. VS did not have a clear understanding of runes as of yet. His attempts to impart ascension runes to his mechs did not count as he did not master the runes himself. He merely laid the groundwork for their appearance. Working with an existing artifact that was marked by runes was a good opportunity to learn how ancient creation cultivators utilized runes in their attempts to produce high-level artifacts. So long as he understood the gist of it, he could apply his newfound knowledge in all kinds of useful applications. Perhaps he could upgrade his ascension runes and help them reach the next level by having them synergize with each other much more extensively than before. This was still an uphill battle, though. There was only so much he could learn from studying an artifact without completely dismantling it. He was also lacking crucial theoretical knowledge that Vulcan would not be able to make up for due to his lack of book learning. All of this made it more difficult to upgrade the flower parasol to his satisfaction. He hated the thought of disappointing his daughter. This was more than trying to create the best possible birthday present. VS wanted to create an iconic relic that would serve Aurelia well and accompany her as she grew older and entered different stages of her life. In order to ensure that the flower parasol remained strong and useful enough to remain in use, VS needed to do his best to future-proof it and ensure it could continue to improve over time. Do you think you can teach me how to change your size like the ocean collar? How about creating a pocket dimension where Aurelia can safely stash you before pulling you out when she needs your protection? Do you even know anything that I can use? An artifact was just an artifact in the end. It was unable to explain how it was made just as much as VS did not understand how his Phase Lord physique worked nowadays. He at least managed to earn its trust. It might not be able to provide much technical guidance, but it was willing to let VS examine its structure and runes. All of this helped VS refine and expand upon his design for the next iteration of the flower parasol. If this works out, you will definitely become a lot more powerful and unique. You might not be able to come close to matching the power of the heaven's word, but that is okay. So long as you persist in your growth, you may one day be able to catch up to this ancient relic weapon. The flower parasol became increasingly more enthusiastic about the changes that VS had in store. He not only proved his sincerity, he also showed excellent understanding of what the flower parasol truly desired: a unique identity. VS did not forget that the mech designer system only produced a copy of the original flower parasol. No matter how remarkable this template must have been, the one in his possession was ultimately a pale imitation of the real thing. VS went out of his way to propose a redesign that would make it impossible for others to mistake it for the flower parasol. Only by transforming it into an entirely different object would it truly be able to forge its own legend rather than borrowing the legend of its predecessor. VS believed this was the essence of true high-level artifact production. Thank you for reading my work. If you wish to support the Mech Touch, please vote with your golden tickets. Purchase privilege for the Mech Touch. Read a varying amount of chapters ahead of regular readers, while enjoying a 99% discount on unlocking new chapters. Join the Mech Touch's unofficial Discord server, https://discord.gg/apb5kcu. Chapter 7078. VS the Naughty Boy. Chapter 7078. VS the Naughty Boy. Over the ensuing week, VS met with more trade brokers and the sellers they found for him. He attended a lot of meetings and discussed business with plenty of people. VS felt as if he was rapidly integrating into the bustling business scene of Yernstall 4. He quickly became a known figure among this community. The Larkin Sun clan made a lot of small to mid-sized concessions during this busy week. With the Saint Commander's approval, VS traded away bits and pieces of mid-grade and high-grade superdimensional matter, depleting the strategic reserves of the Larkin Sun clan by a worrisome degree. The only reasons why VS and Casella did not feel more concern about giving away all of this superdimensional matter was because Kedis was close to opening up another dimension breach. With the handful of upgrades to the Dimension Observatory, the next mining run should definitely deliver a greater yield than in the past 2 mining runs. Of course, not everything deserved to be paid with this precious resource. The Larkin Sun clan freely exchanged strategic goods that it had plundered from the battlefield, such as phase water, salvaged high-grade exotics, mutated beasts, high-ranking alien prisoners, and even phase water organs. VS did not agree with exchanging that last part, but this was one issue where the Saint Commander insisted on standing her ground. We cannot keep piling up these gigantic phase water organs inside enormous vaults that all require tight security in order to deter thieves from robbing them. Her physical projection calmly explained to VS. It would be one thing if our researchers are actually capable and numerous enough to derive useful studies from them, but that is not the case. Despite your focused investments in the Larkinson Biotech Institute, it simply cannot scale up as fast as necessary to study and make good use of all of those phase water organs. The fact of the matter is that we can get much more out of them if we sell them straight away rather than hoard them for no good reason. But I am aware of your interest in them, but there are limits to what our biotech researchers can do, Casella said. The only way to quickly improve our ability to research the phase water organs is to take over an R&D institution that has already developed the right expertise for it. That is impossible as the Red Association and the Red Collective control virtually all of them. They will never let them go even if we offer high-grade superdimensional matter in return. Given that our clan only has one human phase lord and a compromised one at that, I cannot think of any justification to maintain our heavy investment in the research of phase lord organs. The Saint Commander understood why this policy decision would make the former patriarch upset, but she had to take her duties as the new leader of the Larkinson clan seriously. This was not a problem where she could fudge the truth and get away with prioritizing private interests over public interests. The pros and cons of each decision were too far apart from each other. The clan could save a lot of expenses and allocate its research capacity a lot more effectively. Since Casella was being so serious about this, VS had little choice but to concede this argument. He knew she was making the right decision for him as well. There were other organizations that could make much better use of the phase water organs harvested from the greater phase lords felled by the Larkinsons. This was a better benefit for Red humanity as a whole, as it needed to convert as much of its plunder into its armed forces as possible. Fine. I am not opposed to selling most of the phase water organs, but I would still like for us to retain the rarest and most relevant organs for me. Even if my phase lord cultivation is more of a detriment than an asset to the clan these days, who knows whether that will change in the future. Which organs do you want us to hold on then, VS? Let me tell you that I will agree to retain 6 phase water organs. That will give you enough of a selection and will keep all of our in-house specialists on phase water organs busy for a long time. What a small quota. A total of just 6 phase water organs was too restrictive for his tastes. Can I get a few more? There are a lot of attractive organs that have great implications for me if I am successfully able to implant a version of them into my true body. No, the matriarch flatly said, making it clear that she did not intend to quibble over this issue. VS sighed. Fine. Let me think about it for a moment. I need to go over the list of old and new phase water organs that are currently in our possession. He quickly pulled up the list of organs, including the most recent ones harvested from the carcass of the 5th Lord of Bisquet. 2x phase water production system produces phase water. 1x greater Narigo organ, accelerated healing through rapid digestion. 2x greater Marigal organ, increased density and durability of flesh. 1x lesser Simpatico organ, remotely interface with Architect products. 1x lesser Kali organ, split mass to form a miniature clone. 1x greater Voshkin organ, instantly propels a phase lord forward. 1x greater Tarse organ, anchors a phase lord in space and calms nearby space. 1x greater Farid organ, massively extends detection range of warp bubbles. 1x greater loaded organ, significantly increases warp factor of warp travel. 1x greater Enid organ, moderately increases reaction speed and strengthens reflexes. 1x greater Zwain organ, generates organic beacon that transmits superdimensional signals. VS did not have a clear impression of it, but now that he glanced at the list, he had to admit that the Saint Commander was right to worry about all of the massive organs piling up in the LBI's biostorage facilities. When he went over the organs harvested from the 5th Lord of Bisquet, he was able to recognize a definite pattern. The 5th Lord of Bisquet was probably a naughty boy, he said with an amused voice. From what I can tell about his selection of greater phase water organs, much of them are geared towards tracking and intercepting starships or maybe even other phase lords that are engaged in warp travel. The greater Farid organ can serve a defensive or offensive purpose, but when you combine it with the greater loaded organ, the combination lends itself too well towards commerce raiding or piracy. There was no way the 5th Lord of Bisquet had noble intentions when he integrated this set of greater phase water organs. This stood in stark contrast to the much more honorable and upstanding Arena Lord of Yaguasa, whose phase water organs were largely geared towards strengthening his direct combat capabilities. Both of them were Nunzer greater phase lords, yet their inclinations differed enormously. This reminded VS that the Nunzers were anything but uniform. They encompassed vastly different individuals just like humans. Casella was not interested in the 5th Lord's dirty laundry. From the moment St. Dice ended his life, he ceased to be a point of concern. This was in contrast to the Protector of Karnak, who successfully fought against a full superdimensional ace mech and lived to tell the tale. He would definitely convey a lot of critical intelligence back to his phase whale masters. Make your choice, VS. The sooner you decide, the sooner we can clear our inventory. Fine. Let me think about what I want. VS recognized that he needed to specialize just as the Nunzer Greater Phase Lords had done. It was not feasible to integrate many different phase water organs with many different functions. Just like how most mech pilots specialized in specific mech archetypes, VS felt it was prudent to stick to one mode. So what did he want to become? A pure warrior? No. VS was not a fighter, and his alter ego Sev never enjoyed formal combat training. It was too much to ask for either of them to duel and brawl against actual warriors. VS believed he needed to synergize his own phase lord capabilities with the features of his upcoming polymetal mech. Now that he had made a lot of strides in setting up the design project, he had a better idea of what he would end up with. The polymetal mech possessed both productive and destructive capabilities. This meant that it was at least partially supportive in function. That suited VS a lot better than punching phase lords in the face like a simple brute. He decided to commit to a support role, even if he needed to force Sev to concede control over his true body in order to make effective use of his upcoming polymetal mech. In order to make his selection easier, he crossed out the options that he did not need as much as the others. No phase water organ was useless, but some were less relevant to him than others. He decided to get rid of the greater Marigal organs and the greater Narigo organ because he shouldn't be brawling so heavily that he needed to increase his durability and self-recovery capabilities. He chose to remove the lesser Simpatico organ because interfacing with Architect was more relevant to Gloriana than himself. He removed the greater Voshkin organ because charging forward sounded like the most dispensable ability. He crossed out the greater Enid organ because it was most relevant to brawlers and weapon masters. This left him with a reduced selection of phase water organs that definitely slanted heavily towards the fifth lord of Bisquet. In other words, VS would rather become a naughty boy than an honorable warrior. He could see many potential uses for the ability to detect distant entities traveling in warp and trying to overtake them before yanking them back into real space. Only by plundering more aliens would VS and the Larkinson clan be able to continue to enrich themselves. I have made my selection, he announced. I would like you to preserve a single phase water production system, a lesser Kali organ, a greater Tarse organ, a greater Farid organ, a greater Loaded organ, and a greater Zwain organ. Casella Ingvar instantly understood what VS was going for. Are you sure about your choices? You are sacrificing self-defense for utility. With the bounty on your head, you need all of the protection that you can get. Most of your dreams will end once you are killed. I am sure, VS said with a determined voice. If I want to strengthen my defenses, I will rely on my upcoming polymetal mech to do that. What I need are capabilities that are difficult to replicate with technology. Since he sounded so certain, the matriarch did not attempt to persuade VS any further. He was old and wise enough to make his own decisions. Very well then, I will inform the LBI to package the unwanted phase water organs and prepare them for shipping. I will permit you to seek out trades where you can exchange them for necessary goods and services. I highly advise you to exchange at least one of them for external R&D support in the study of our remaining phase water organs. The sooner we use them up, the better. I was just about to make that request. It is good to hear that we are of the same mind on this issue. I am sure the transhumanist faction of the RA or the Phase Lord department of the RC would be happy to lend us their expertise after we reveal what we are willing to offer. Despite all of the concerns about Sev, having a stronger and more capable Phase Lord on hand might save their hides one day. Now that he had made his selection, he no longer felt bad about clearing out the less relevant phase water organs. He felt liberated as he had chosen a focused and more concrete development trajectory for his Phase Lord cultivation. Although VS still had a few concerns about strengthening his alter ego, enough time had passed since the initial emergence of Sev to conclude that the latter could not arbitrarily take control. So long as VS restrained himself from unfolding his true body, he was sure he could keep his more savage and inhuman personality in check. Thank you for reading my work. If you wish to support the Mech Touch, please vote with your golden tickets. Purchase privilege for the Mech Touch. Read a varying amount of chapters ahead of regular readers, while enjoying a 99% discount on unlocking new chapters. Join the Mech Touch's unofficial Discord server. https://discord.gg/apb5kcu. Chapter 7079. The Essence of the Phase Water Production System. Chapter 7079. The Essence of the Phase Water Production System. We are more than happy to help your clan research and convert your phase water organs in a more useful form, Vector Loban said after he concluded a small deal with the Larkinsons. Normally, we prefer to let the specialists over at the Phase Lord department of the Red Collective take over this responsibility, but you should be aware of our growing concerns regarding its people. All of the recent developments had overshadowed the mystery surrounding the increasingly more infamous department. Yet that did not mean that the collies managed to solve the problem. VS had heard very little progress about it, which implied that the Phase Lord department continued to remain a big problem. A part of him wanted to change his mind and pay a visit to the Astral Octagon, but another part of him felt that intervening at the wrong time could get him into big trouble. After all, he happened to be a human Phase Lord himself. Many people might assume that he would automatically side with the Phase Lord department, which was not the case. VS did not want the RC to experience a rift so shortly after its founding. Given the instability and uncertainty that had taken hold of the young and shakily run superorganization, he decided it was better to partner with the transhumanist faction this time. While the transhumanists had shifted most of their work related to the study of Phase Lords to the collies, recent events prompted them to partially reverse this decision. If the Phase Lord department had truly gone rogue, then the Meshers needed to be able to gain an understanding of Phase Lords without relying on a third party. VS was happy to work with the transhumanists. They may be crazy in their own way, but they were not traitors or unreliable. He cooperated with them for years and did not have too many complaints so long as the evolution which did not stick her nose in his business. So how quickly can your biotech researchers deliver results? Your faction agreed to help the LBI derive human-compatible phase water organs from our remaining alien phase water organs. Our clan is paying you a whole and functioning phase water production system for your services. The Saint Commander was reluctant to give away such a valuable strategic asset just to expedite your research assistance, but I insisted upon it because speed is of the essence. The transhumanist liaison briefly paused as he retrieved the relevant data from the RACE internal network. I understand your desire for haste, VS, but please do not entertain any unrealistic expectations. Our biotech researchers are busier than ever since the mutated Vorabugs have emerged as a new threat. We urgently need to understand them better and have diverted many of our scientists to studying the new Vorabug subspecies. However, I can promise you that we are on the verge of expanding the research teams that are still assigned to study phase lords and phase whales. We have not neglected the necessity of understanding their strengths and weaknesses. VS took Vector at his word. That is good to hear, but can you give me a more concrete timeline? The complexity of the phase water organs that you have retained are all high, some more than others. Understanding the working mechanisms of the phase water production system is a particularly high priority for us. You have greatly aided our research by donating an intact version of one to us. We already have them, but each additional PPS in our possession allows us to allocate more research teams that are permitted to hold riskier experiments. Even then, if nothing else changes, do not expect us to deliver anything useful until half a decade later. Do note that this is only a loose estimate. Given the immense complexity and amazing features of the PPS, 5 years was already the best that the transhumanist faction could offer under the circumstances. It was not realistic to expect the Meshers to complete their research faster. Fine. What about the other organs? Broadly speaking, it will take at least 2 years to deliver an initial result. The more difficult phase water organs may take a decade to decipher. This is not an absolute. I can very well imagine that our research team may have to spend 2 decades of their life to finally produce a successful result if they are unable to call upon any further assistance. All of this was taking too long, but VS had no other alternative. He had largely chosen to hold back the greater phase water organs, which were larger and more difficult to figure out. It would take a lot of time to crack their secrets and make them usable to humans. VS knew that there was little point in urging greater speed. He was still a lesser phase lord. Before he could integrate the greater phase water organs, he still needed to integrate a phase water production system first. VS was not sure whether a human greater phase lord even existed at this time. He felt it was way too early for the phase lord department to achieve a major breakthrough on this front. VS continued to chat with Vector about developments related to the study of phase lords and phase water organs. During their discussion, the transhumanist made a startling revelation. Our studies into the PPS have long confounded us because how it does not make sense, Vector said. Its biological arrangements shouldn't work according to our own theories. We have even less understanding of where the phase water actually comes from. It seems as if it magically conjures it up from a pocket of empty space. It is only after we gained access to superdimensional matter and recognized a number of familiar properties that we learned the truth. The PPS is the first true superdimensional organ that we have discovered. Its sophistication and organic principles far exceed other phase water organs in complexity. It is as if it was developed by a greater species than the phase whales. VS looked shocked. He never imagined that the PPS possessed such an amazing origin and composition. Are you saying that the native aliens are on to something whenever they reference their supposed elder gods? Are they the species responsible for uplifting the phase whale race and gifting them with the design of a phase water production organ? Vector shrugged. This is one of the theories that have gained traction within our faction. There are many other theories that do not rely on the existence of the elder gods. Whatever the case, the PPS derives much of its remarkable properties from the modest amount of mid-grade superdimensional matter that is efficiently arranged within its organic tissue. All of the phase water that is reinforcing the flesh and structure has previously blinded our sensors of the presence of small amounts of alien-grade superdimensional matter spread across the organ. They are spread across the entire organ in small concentrations, but are always augmented by large amounts of phase water-infused tissue. That sounded as if the superdimensional matter was present in just enough quantities to open up new possibilities, but relied on the rest of the PPS to do the heavy lifting. In other words, the superdimensional matter acted similar to Ketty's whenever she opened up a new dimension breach. She, or rather the Dimension Observatory, created a temporary passage to the blue dimension. What came next were a huge number of mining mechs, mining vehicles and/or transportation vehicles. Each of them worked hard to mine and bring back as much superdimensional matter as possible. Ketty's did not involve herself in all of the large-scale mining activity, but she undeniably played a crucial role in making this possible. If the PPS worked in the same fashion but for the purpose of producing phase water rather than superdimensional matter, then it should no longer pose as much of a mystery to VS anymore. He was sure that there was a lot of fascinating superdimensional science and bioengineering at play, but people should be able to unravel those secrets soon enough. What was important was that the meshers discovered the key principles and basic functioning of the PPS. It was no longer an organic black box anymore. That would have many implications on future research and development. VS could already draw one insightful conclusion from what he learned. The strategic value of superdimensional matter had grown even further. Learning how to create your own PPS had become a lot more vital. Many people dreamt of owning a sustainable source of phase water. The PPS not only offered liberation to its users, but could also help a greater phase lord meet the exponentially greater consumption of his own true body. So the native aliens have access to and made use of superdimensional matter before the Red War began. VS flatly said, "Can we make more superdimensional organs based on the template of this original one? That is sadly out of our budget and capabilities, VS. You are asking us to fly when we have not even learned how to run. We have only just begun to walk. There is much to go before we can master every mystery that makes a PPS work. We can only promise to reproduce one within 5 years because we expect that advancements in superdimensional technology will help us understand the PPS better. We are essentially freeloading off their research." "I see. Well, I don't really care about the details. I will be happy so long as you deliver on your end of the bargain." Red humanity still did not know much about superdimensional theory. This was why the major players directed a lot of physicists and other scientists to figure out as much as possible. They urgently needed to build up their theoretical frameworks and catch up to the native aliens who were already capable of manipulating superdimensional matter in advanced applications. However, one possible consolation was that the phase whales did not invent the methods to process superdimensional matter into superior applications but inherited them from the elder gods. If the latter was the case, then it was quite plausible for the phase whales to lack true understanding of what they were dealing with. If they revered superdimensional matter as god bones, then the very act of trying to decipher the secrets of this material could be regarded as sacrilege. All of this gave VS hope that red humanity might be able to overtake the native aliens when it came to understanding the essence of superdimensional theory and utilizing it to create wondrous new mechs and other war weapons. VS lamented that he was still stuck in the early stage of this technological cycle. He had to wait for multiple years before he could think of benefiting from all of the advancements in superdimensional technology. At least the delays bought him lots of time to solve his hidden personality. He had not forgotten about Sev's existence. Now that he resided in Jernstall, he was thinking about whether it was a good idea to borrow the RA's assistance to confront his alter ego in a safe environment. He was too busy, though. Between his ongoing design obligations, the need to meet with important sellers, and attending a social event here and there, VS found himself short on time. One of the most important events that took place during his stay in Jernstall was the return of a lot of old friends. The Larkinsons, who had experienced multiple subjective years of intensive training and education, had finally come out of EdNet training. While they had not all been able to stay up to the limit of 4 full years, the Red Ocean was changing way too quickly. The longer they remained hooked up to a virtual universe, the more they grew out of touch with the real universe. The pressure of continuing to stay in an accelerated virtual learning environment rose considerably with every passing day. Given that staying longer than 3 years was already a form of mental torture for most people, VS did not blame the Larkinsons for ending their session and returned to reality, where the Larkinsons needed their newly gained skill sets a lot more urgently than ever. VS and Gloriana both freed a lot of time in their schedule to meet with the EdNet-trained Larkinsons and welcome them back into the fold. Thank you for reading my work. If you wish to support the Mech Touch, please vote with your golden tickets. Purchase privilege for the Mech Touch. Read a varying amount of chapters ahead of regular readers while enjoying a 99% discount on unlocking new chapters. Join the Mech Touch's unofficial Discord server, https://discord.gg/apb5kcu. Chapter 7080 EdNet Graduates. Chapter 7080 EdNet Graduates. The Larkinsons that had chosen to undergo EdNet training already ended their lengthy and strenuous session more than a week ago. Their conditions upon exiting virtual reality were awful. Their brain had been running on up to 4 times their normal thinking speed during every waking moment. This was not normal. The Larkinsons who volunteered for this training all went through extensive preparations in order to make sure they could endure the pressure as long as possible. They all received first-class cranial implants and other augmentations in order to bring them up to standard in a manner of speaking. None of this treatment was cheap, but the Larkinson clan had already made an agreement with the Red Association about it. VS wanted to accept nothing less than the best for his clansmen. The absence of so many mech designers and high-ranking personnel left a large void in the Larkinson clan at the time. VS found himself missing the company of a lot of trustworthy friends and comrades. He had fought or worked alongside them for up to a decade. He dearly missed their expertise. He could have definitely used their talents and advice in the years following the Great Severing. Yet that was a short-term perspective on the matter. The cold hard truth was that third-class professionals possessed too many shortcomings compared to the well-educated first-raters that the Larkinsons preferred to recruit these days. It was too much to ask for people who grew up in third-rate states such as the Bright Republic to become as competent at their jobs as former Terrans and Rebarthans. VS had given all of the cadre of the Larkinson clan an offer to undergo EdNet training. Many accepted, but there were those that refused for one reason or another. People like Kedis could not bear to separate herself from her children. She also was not really in a hurry to be promoted to a first-class mech designer. In hindsight, those who stayed behind did not necessarily lose out. This was because the introduction of systematic cultivation drastically reduced the gap between third-raters and first-raters. Although genetic treatments and artificial implants still granted significant advantages to their recipients, those who cultivated the right methods steadily increased their learning speeds and comprehension. They were able to simulate the performance of expensive augmentations for a fraction of the cost. Not everyone improved at the same speed as others, but everyone benefited in at least one fashion or another. This diminished the gains made by the people who went through EdNet training as they were unable to cultivate while they resided in the virtual learning environment. All they could do was to follow the original plan and cram as many lessons taught by the Red Association into their heads as possible. Perhaps the biggest advantage of going through EdNet training was that each participant had access to a lot of high-quality lessons and teaching materials from one of the most powerful human organizations. The mech designers were especially happy as the RA freely made a lot of internal courses available to them. They all enjoyed an education that was almost equivalent to what internal members such as Jovi Armelon and Vector Loban once enjoyed. Many high technologies that Red humanity had mastered over the centuries became available to them. Since the mech designers all possessed highly defined specializations, they could easily select additional courses on subjects that were directly related to their design philosophies. All of this meant that VS and Gloriana expected to welcome a lot of powerful helpers. The arrival of so many loyal, first-class mech designers should definitely boost the productivity of the design department by noticeable degree. The other professionals also received a lot of lessons that prepared them to occupy high positions in a powerful first-class organization. They gained a comprehensive amount of knowledge on history, management, culture, military leadership, alien civilizations, and more. Once they returned to the clan, they would definitely be able to professionalize the Larkinson clan even further. Given the importance of reintegrating the EdNet graduates into the clan, VS and Gloriana decided to book a middle-sized venue and welcome the returning Larkinsons with a banquet. That was why VS and his immediate family had dressed up for the occasion and waited for the RA to bring back the recovered Larkinsons. "Look, a convoy is flying in. I bet they are coming," Andres said and pointed beyond the courtyard. VS already confirmed that the passenger shuttles contained Larkinsons. They were all connected to the Larkinson network, so they were able to recognize each other as kin even without showing their faces to each other. It had been a while since he felt the presence of General Vorl, Director Calabast, and the Voikin siblings. In his impression, the gap between them was smaller than he anticipated. VS had grown enormously during the Age of Dawn. He developed his spirituality further and absorbed a lot of scattered knowledge. His successes propelled his design philosophy to greater heights. Yet the EdNet graduates did not think they had fallen behind too much compared to the founder of the clan. Many of them had mastered skills and absorbed knowledge that only the RA had access to during normal times. This gave them the qualifications to participate in greater affairs. They had turned from people who could previously only look up to the high-end mighty first-raters to becoming their equals. To ordinary people, this was their own version of transcendence. A third-rater transforming into a first-rater was as significant as ascending to godhood as far as many people were concerned. VS had managed to accomplish this through his own work and the gambles I had made during my downtime. The EdNet graduates did so due to a combination of talent and being lucky enough to be eligible to take advantage of a life-changing opportunity. As the Larkinsons wearing new and pristine smart clothing disembarked from their vehicles, VS could immediately tell that they had yet to return to their peak. Each and every Larkinson looked tired in one way or another. It was as if they had been forced to stay awake for too long. The constant exertion and low-level brain damage inflicted by prolonged exposure to an accelerated virtual reality had caused each of the graduates to look as if they had been wrung out of every bit of courage they had left. The returning Larkinsons almost looked traumatized if not for the low smiles adorning their faces. They were tired, but they were also content with how much they managed to improve. Yet for all of their gains, they also exhibited a bit of discomfort to the reality around them. They spent so much time in a distorted virtual setting that the EdNet graduates felt out of sync with the cosmos. It was as if they no longer recognized the society they previously lived in. So much had changed in so little time that they still felt a bit disjointed. The group filed out of their vehicles and automatically moved forward until they stood in front of VS. Their behavior largely suggested that they still saw him as their patriarch and leader. Even though they should have kept up with the news from the real universe, the changes clearly had not fully set into their cognitions. VS inwardly sighed. The disconnect between reality and these people was much more severe than he expected. If the Larkinson clan wanted to smoothly integrate these disparate forces, she must find a way to become the thread that binded them to a grand cause. As the highest-ranking official of the Larkinson clan who went through EdNet training first, General Quinlist Vril stepped forward and saluted VS. "It is a pleasure to see you again, Patriarch Emeritus VS." VS smiled back. "I am glad that you have returned, Vril. By the way, don't call me Patriarch. I have stepped down recently. I am just a mech designer these days." "You are far more than a mech designer." General Vril shook his head. "You are still the founder of our clan, the father of Carmine Mechs, a Tier 3 galactic citizen, a friend of 2 god pilots, a son of a literal goddess, a member of the Oblivion Gate Consortium, the founder and an important counselor of the Red Collective, the creator of the first god ship and the first human phase lord. You managed to accomplish most of what I have listed during the time we stayed away from the clan. That is definite proof that you are far more than a simple mech designer." "Okay, maybe General Vril made a good point. It has been difficult for me to carry so many burdens, General. Now that you and your fellow EdNet graduates are back and ready to get to work, I need you to find your place in the clan and do your best to help us survive the current crisis. You should already know that we are resisting against 2 formidable opponents at this time." General Vril actually began to grin. "Good. Our civilization is in dire straits if it is locked in a deathmatch against a single opponent, but now that the Vorabugs have emerged, the Red Ocean has become host to a free-for-all. There is much more room for maneuver for us. We will need to do our best to make the mutated Vorabugs attack Rabarthan's pace over our own. We can do this through a combination of overt actions and covert sabotage. We can take care of this mission on your behalf. Let's not be too hasty, Vril. You still have to fully reconnect with the current reality before you can tackle anything of significance." After he finished his chat with General Vril, VS turned her attention to Director Calabast Arnlend, the clan's foremost spy mistress and intrigue master. She looked the most well-adjusted among the EdNet graduates. It looked as if her tolerance for this kind of training was significantly better than normal. She fared so much better that she most definitely was not drunk or intoxicated. What was also different was how much possessiveness and superiority she conveyed through her language and body languages. "Calabast. VS. You look smarter. I think deadlier is the more correct term, but I shall excuse your questionable judgment," she said with her characteristic smirk. "Our intelligence apparatus has clearly grown too passive as of late. That is not the intention. We need to be more willing to break a few rules in order to fulfill our objectives. It is my job to help the people understand who they are truly facing." After he was done with greeting Calabast, VS waited for the journeymen to present themselves. "Sir." Sarah Voikin stood at attention. "We have come back as changed mech designers. Each of us have become first-class mech designers without a doubt. What we lack is a direction to work towards. We hope that you or the new matriarch can fill these positions for us again." VS could understand her concerns. "We have formulated detailed plans to reintroduce yourselves back to your original departments. Be patient. Everything will work out somehow." "How strong is your grasp on the new tech?" "Quite strong," she responded. "I will be happy to explain my gains later on. My colleagues can present their own stories to you. Each of us have made sure to branch out and master specializations that you normally would not expect from us. We have become more knowledgeable and versatile than before. We are looking forward to your demonstration." Gloriana happily voiced. "The design department will become stronger than ever before. This is a great development, VS. Maybe it is time for you to start the design process of genuine first-class multipurpose living mechs." VS seriously considered this option. It would keep all of the returning mech designers busy while also showcasing how much they have improved. "I will think about it," he said. "I can see the merits of this decision. Thank you for reading my work. If you wish to support the Mech Touch, please vote with your golden tickets. Purchase privilege for the Mech Touch. Read a varying amount of chapters ahead of regular readers while enjoying a 99% discount on unlocking new chapters. Join the Mech Touch's unofficial Discord server, https://discord.gg/apb5kcu. Chapter 7081, Better Larkinsons. Chapter 7081, Better Larkinsons. After greeting the newly returned Larkinsons, VS led them into the rented banquet hall where they all got to enjoy a taste of Yernstall IV's delicacies. Although the EdNet graduates still had not mentally and physically recovered to their old conditions, their attitudes had perked up. Each of them spent half a mech generation's worth of time in a time-warped virtual reality environment. Their only mission was to learn as much knowledge from the Red Association's abundant teaching resources as possible. Despite their new and powerful first-class augmentations, their course load was immense. This especially applied to poorly educated third-raters such as General Vril. Many of them felt as if they were experiencing a second run of their childhoods. They had been deprived of responsibility over the Larkinson clan and just needed to cram theories and practice their problem-solving skills all day. The EdNet provided a rich variety of virtual universities and academies. Some of them focused more on practical work while others delved deep into the heart of every theory. There were mech academies that taught mech pilots how to pilot first-class multi-purpose mechs from the ground up, and there were also officer academies that condensed millennia's worth of military theory into a 10-year syllabus. The teachings refined the Larkinsons. Each of them had become a reinvented man or woman. They still retained a part of their old traits, but newer ones had taken shape as well. The separation between VS and the EdNet graduates still remained for that reason. Even now, the latter still acted as if they were time travelers who had been dumped into a completely new universe or timeline. So much had changed in so few years. They could scarcely imagine how little time it took for the polymath to go rogue and declare herself an empress, and how the Terrans and the Rebarthans gathered the guts to declare independence. They never imagined that superdimensional matter would overtake phase water as the next big resource, or how the Larkinson clan actually controlled a major source of its output. The Red Collective was still a strange and mysterious organization to them. The virtual reality they resided in was only designed to model the reality of a low-energy environment. While their dormant bodies passively absorbed E-energy radiation, their minds remained completely out of contact with this new phenomenon, causing their spiritualities to be weaker on average. At least they weren't as weak as the citizens of the cybernetic empire, who had to rely entirely on cybernetics to make up for the gaps created by systematic cultivation for the time being. As the banquet steadily progressed, VS and Gloriana made sure to circulate around the banquet hall and engage the slightly disoriented EdNet graduates in conversation. "I have heard that you are in the final stages of completing the Riot Mark III project." Dilo Voikin spoke to Gloriana. "It may be too late for me to become a contributing mech designer to the project, but I would still like to offer my services to you. I have focused my time in the EdNet on deepening my specializations. Among my cohort, I am by far the best at designing spearman mechs and polearms. Let me demonstrate my improvements to you and perfect the expert spearman mech that I originally contributed to. It would be painful for me to see him deployed in battle without the optimizations that allows for venerable Orphan to wield her battle partner as if he was an extension of her will." Gloriana, who wore a sophisticated blue dress, contemplated the proposal in her mind. This was a troublesome request, as the addition of a mech designer at this late stage of the project might cause its completion to be postponed. Yet the opportunity to have her work checked by a passionate, trustworthy, and much more competent specialist in spearman mech was too good to pass over. Her perfectionism demanded that she take his offer seriously. "I will permit you to assist me in the final optimizations of the design, Dilo. Please be aware that the major design choices are already set. To change them at this late stage will cause at least a month's worth of delays. That is unacceptable. If you have any suggestions to make that require more drastic redesign work, you can save them until we are ready to embark on the Riot Mark IV project. Is that understood?" Dilo clearly did not like this instruction, but what could he do? While he arguably knew more about first-class mech design than Gloriana, he still remembered his place in the hierarchy. His time in EdNet training had not given him a sense of superiority over those who chose to remain behind. This was especially the case knowing that Gloriana possessed one of the best cranial implant suites that mech designers could dream of. The mentalist crystal fragments embedded in her cybernetic circuitry subtly strengthened her personality and intellectual aura. None of the mech designers who graduated from EdNet training dared to contest her leadership over the design department, especially after they learned how much she managed to learn while still juggling design work and child-rearing duties. What these Larkinsons did not know was that Gloriana had not entirely relied on her augmented learning capabilities to become so knowledgeable in a short amount of time. She had recently strengthened her qualifications to design first-class mechs by taking advantage of her access to the mech designer system. While she could not afford any of the expensive Enlightenment fruits, the cheaper ones that strengthened her fundamentals were much more affordable. The small accumulation of those budget Enlightenment fruits did wonders in strengthening her basic understanding of the principles behind the most common form of high technologies utilized in first-class mechs. It was practically unfair how Gloriana was able to acquire much of the benefits of EdNet training without subjecting her to continuous staring and years' worth of isolation from the rest of the galaxy. VS actually regretted that he did not introduce the system sooner to his fellow mech designers. They could have remained in touch with current events and still improved by leaps and bounds if he invited them to become users of the mech designer system shortly before or after the start of the Age of Dawn. Alas, he was not psychologically prepared to share the system at that time. His reputation and prestige was also not as great as now. Without the Blue Jay fleet or first-class ace mechs charged with his protection, it would have been foolish to even hint at the existence of his mother's gift. At least all of the EdNet training provided a bit of cover when more and more of the Larkinson mech designers started to show unusual competences. It was not perfect, but anything was better than nothing. After chatting with a bunch of mech designers and officers, VS found himself drifting back to the enchanting form of Calabast. The woman hardly looked different from the last time that he saw her in person. She always had excellent control over her appearance and presentation. She could come across as unassuming or intimidating by subtly altering her body language and behavior. This time, she chose to maintain an unassuming but charming appearance that stood out just enough to convey the illusion that she had evolved somehow. So what do you think? VS asked an open-ended question. How Calabast interpreted his question and chose to answer it was a test in itself. You got out at a good time. She replied, obviously referring to his decision to resign from office. It is important to remember that you founded the Larkinson clan to support your activities as a mech designer. It has grown to the extent that it can already do so without requiring your supervision or leadership. You sacrificed a moderate amount of control to absolve you of most of the responsibilities and burdens that come with leading a prominent clan. That is a good exchange in my opinion. Your status is already great enough that you can easily find willing collaborators and partners for your design projects. You are no longer shackled to your own clansmen. Her words rang true to his ears. He couldn't help but nod. The Larkinsons have many limitations. They mean well, but they have yet to catch up to the likes of the Red Association in terms of R&D, strategic resource accumulation, industrial capacity, and connections. My design scope has grown so quickly that the clan cannot keep up with my demands anymore. I find myself cooperating increasingly more with the established players. That is good, Calabast said. The clan is not forced to take extreme measures to meet up to your expectations. It is not necessarily detrimental if they need more time to take on greater responsibilities. As for you, your growth rate is so fast that it is impossible for you to maintain your policy of self-reliance. Unless you are willing to slow down, you will only become more dependent on the resources of the Red 3 and other powerful groups. One point I would like to commend you on is that you have done a good job at maintaining your neutrality. Maintaining friendships with all of the major players without upsetting any of them is a great feat. You have a bright future if you can continue to balance your relations equally. VS sardonically smiled. It helped a lot that the big players maintained cordial if strained relationships with each other all of the time. They did not like each other, but they weren't outright enemies. I fear that will change in the future. The need to maintain a united front against two different hostile alien civilizations is keeping everyone in check, but who knows how much covert warfare is taking place outside of public awareness. That caused the spy to smirk. You can bet that the intelligence operatives of the Red 2 and the newly independent colonial alliances have already engaged in hostilities. It is clear that the intelligence agencies of the RA and the RF have failed badly. The Meshers and the Fleeters should be in a hurry to compensate. They are likely doing this by ordering their agents to become more aggressive and unscrupulous in their secretive operations. This is a means to remind others that they still have teeth. How stupid. It sounded as if the Meshers and the Fleeters had too big of an ego to acknowledge their failure with calm and rationality. They had to lash out just to prove they were still formidable enough. It reminded VS of the utterly wasteful and short-lived Crown Uprising. All it did was to expose the Five Scrolls Compact to more people and squander a lot of manpower for very little if any benefit to the secretive cult. Well, it doesn't really matter to us, VS said. Whatever covert warfare is going on behind the scenes has nothing to do with us. We have taken greater responsibility and spent most of our efforts into resisting the invading aliens. I think that has earned us enough recognition and goodwill from other parties. However, there are limits to what we can do. Your return and the return of other EdNet graduates will help, but we are still plagued by many inadequacies. I know, VS. I have spent years keeping up with ongoing developments. I have many different plans in mind to improve your standing and the standing of the Larkinson clan, but we can talk about that on another day. Not even Calabast was immune to the immense strain that she had gone through in the past few years. EdNet training imposed so much stress on people that they needed to recover for a long time before they could even think about undergoing another session. VS Mr. Company. Despite missing out on many different life-changing events, he still felt he could depend on her assistance to navigate a dwarf galaxy that had become increasingly murkier as of late. Thank you for reading my work. If you wish to support the Mech Touch, please vote with your golden tickets. Purchase privilege for the Mech Touch. Read a varying amount of chapters ahead of regular readers while enjoying a 99% discount on unlocking new chapters. Join the Mech Touch's unofficial Discord server, https://discord.gg/apb5kcu.